killer's weapon? A 40-ton truck. The victim's only defense? A startling podcast.
What's
Trap? I don't know if that's really an
spoiler alert.
Yeah, also,
kind of giving away his one move in like minute 82.
I was gonna say that's the last minute. It's not like that makes it sound like the movie is him constructing an elaborate trap.
Right. What if a truck guy tried to kill the most ingenious trapper?
Right.
It's like Weaver's behind the wheels. What he doesn't know is that I'm really good at setting traps for trucks.
Well, that's almost the eventual sequel, Duel versus Kraven the Hunter. What if this truck were going after Kraven the Hunter, the greatest trap artist?
Trapper John M.D. to
Sure.
go after him?
Yeah, he's probably the second best trapper I know.
I think Young Thug is definitely one of our best trap artists.
Isn't it crazy, David, to think...
David?
He could just go after
I was waiting
the
for
film
Ben to
Trap.
jump in with that. Yes.
Like the M. Night Shyamalan film Trap.
Okay, so here's the film we're pitching. It's a Lego sequel to Duel.
Yes.
In which the...
Going off of a poster that exists. That's not that famous.
Somehow the 40-ton truck has returned. The flammable truck itself.
Right. Even though it blew up, it's back. Spoiler alert.
Somehow. And it has to fight a team of good guys represented by the Butcher, Mr. Trap himself,
Yes.
Kraven the Hunter.
Yes.
What was the joke he made of a trap artist?
Young Thug.
Young Thug.
Trapper John M.D.
And Trapper John M.D.
I think that's the four. That's the Mount Rushmore of trapping.
Correct. This is, above all else, a movie about trapping.
It's just not at all.
It's not
That's
at
why
all.
This is a terrible tangent
It's a
to
terrible...
start a
But here's
miniseries
the
on.
thing. The quotes were not good either.
No, the
This is
quotes
not
of this
talking
movie are
movie.
like, what's the matter with this guy?
Exactly.
Beep.
Yeah, ready? Let me try a quote. Podcast.
That's pretty good.
That's me saying the word podcast in lieu of a horn.
We could also, we could always do a pickup later where it's like your inner monologue.
Oh, sure.
Where you're thinking about
Okay, ready?
the quote.
Ready? Here's this.
Yeah.
Come on now. Start the podcast.
There's a lot to talk about.
Go ahead.
In the film Duel.
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 As the sort of Brits might say.
Richard Duel.
Richard Jewell.
This is Blank Check with Griffin and David. I'm Griffin.
I'm David.
It's a podcast about filmographies. Directors who have massive success early on in their careers and are given a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion projects they want. Sometimes those checks clear and sometimes they bounce. Baby, it is January 1st? Or no,
it's January 5th.
It's January 5th.
But it's the dawn of a new year.
And this year happens to be the 10th year of Blank Check. This is the start of our 10th year. What you're listening to is the beginning of our 10th year.
Wow.
And thus, we felt, what better way to kick it off than with 6-year-old unfinished business?
Now you guys can't complain anymore.
Now you have
doing
no
this.
grounds to complain. There's nothing you can complain about anymore.
Certainly not in 2025.
No.
Nothing to complain about out there.
The year where everything works. I'm calling it
You're
right
calling
now.
it? I wish you wouldn't.
I think everything's going to work in 2025. All my ingenious traps I set. We're talking about...
I think it's 8 years ago, Griffin, that we covered...
we did in 2017? Is that right?
It was the first episode was indeed January 2017.
So you know what's crazy?
We were kicking off a certain presidency both times, yes. Is that what you're going to say?
Yep.
It's crazy.
That's wild. I didn't realize it lined up that.
It's been 8 years.
It's been 8 long years.
Since we, on this podcast, covered the films of Steven Spielberg. But last time, we threw a curveball.
We did.
And we started in the middle of his career.
We called it Spielberg, the DreamWorks years.
We didn't know what we were doing back then.
No idea what we were doing.
And we covered all of Steven Spielberg's films, starting with The Lost World Jurassic Park, going all the way through to what seemed like the crowning apex final film he would ever make, the BFG. Since then, he's made like 18 more movies. We've covered all of those.
Yes.
But we've never covered everything leading up to Jurassic Park.
Right.
And
And
Schindler's List.
look, what better way to start off our 10th year than to say, I had always thought that Lost World, the Jurassic Park sequel, was his first film ever.
And we found out.
I recently found out that, in fact, the first half of his career was basically a series of the greatest successes any director has had.
He's had a couple of hits
Mhm.
in those 70s, 80s range for sure, and we're going to talk about them
Through to the early
on
90s. Blank check. I said this already. Oh, but the miniseries?
a miniseries titled...
PODRASSIC CAST.
Is that right?
Yep.
I didn't remember.
PODRASSIC CAST.
Okay, good for us. One more time? Wow, we're being run off the road for that title.
Ben informed us that it took 40 minutes to properly load the truck sounds into his soundboard.
Well, I had to track down the right
course.
sounds.
Yes.
It's very important. It's not just any kind of truck horn. It's got to be the right one.
Well, you're an artist, producer Ben.
Yes.
AKA,
Oh boy.
no, here's what I'm going to do. Just one of them.
Okay.
Warhaz.
You know what? That's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
If you just did one
This is a
every
thing
time.
I'm doing for year 10.
2025, year of Ben has one nickname per episode.
Exactly. I think that's a nice way to look back and look forward.
I love that.
What is Ben's David Lynch name?
Great question.
Huh.
Figure it out later.
Yep.
We're here to talk about...
That will
The
be
early-
how we end 2024.
Fine.
You will have heard it by this point.
The films of Steven Spielberg, starting with this week's film, Duel.
No, a bit of a controversial
Not really.
start in terms of there is some debate. Have you watched the John Williams Disney Plus documentary yet?
No.
He goes out of his way, Spielberg, to say my first movie, Sugarland Express.
Which I understand
I get
because I think at the time,
Yep.
that's what it was. That was his first cinematic release.
Yep. And we can dig into this a bit.
And back then they didn't have Peacock, and Paramount Plus.
God, I can't even imagine.
The lines were not blurry. It was like if you're a TV movie, well then that was on TV. You didn't get
Imagine what it must have been like to live through an era without Peacock. You don't even get to see supersized cuts of The Office.
I don't remember.
I don't remember. I mean, thank God I was born in the year 2020 and I never had to witness it. I entered humanity just
It
while
is
it was
weird to
getting
think
good.
that
What?
my children
We'll never
were-
know.
Right. Well, they might. I mean, Peacock may not make it. Like I'm not trying to be rude to Peacock, but it could leave.
I shudder to think.
But they certainly arrived in a world with Peacock. at
You
least.
have 3 post-Peacock children.
Insane.
That's a way to think about a demarcation of time. It's been 8 years since we covered Spielberg and 5 years since Peacock launched. It's banned.
No, April 2020.
Yeah.
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 Named after the NBC logo. Oh, I had no idea.
Look, the world was grieving. A global pandemic had us in its grips. And NBC Universal said, we have the cure.
Peacock?
There's no vaccine yet, but there is
Peacock?
the vaccine for the soul. And it's called Peacock. It's a great way to start what's probably one of our biggest series we've ever done. And our 10th anniversary, Duel.
PODRASSIC CAST. Ben, had
David.
you seen Duel before?
It sounds like you're saying Jewel.
Yeah. Have you seen her before? Where's she at?
Her hands are small,
Sometimes she's in a boat.
but they're her own.
Famously lived in her car.
Right. All right. That's the joke.
If that were true, I would have heard about it.
No, I've never seen this before. I caught a little bit of it on TV.
Mm.
I have this distinct memory of
Yep.
and just being like,
What the fuck is this?
This is so slow and moving and very everyday interaction. Kind of, it just was out of context. It was really weird to just catch it on cable TV.
But was it not until you watched it in earnest for this podcast that you realized, oh, that's that thing I saw years ago?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So at the time you were watching it, you did not know it was Steven Spielberg's first film.
Duel.
No.
We are certainly covering Duel, which, yes, was made for television,
Mhm.
but then did get years later. It got a theatrical release overseas back
Yes.
then,
Yes.
and years later did get a
limited.
release a small release in America too.
Kind of capitalize upon the Spielberg mania.
Who?
Steven Spielberg.
Steven Spielberg.
Spielberg.
So we are certainly big. We always planned if we ever return to Steven's career earlier on to lead off with Duel. Very fun movie about a guy driving a car
Yes.
who a guy driving a truck is mean to.
Look, we've covered this ground a little bit before in the history of the podcast, where most TV movies of any quality would get theatrical releases overseas.
Because they didn't have televisions over there. They said fireplaces.
Is that crazy? Peacock didn't exist until 2020.
Europe didn't get TV till 98.
Yeah.
Before then, they just had the radio.
Those are just facts.
Yep. There would be the radio releases of movies.
Yes.
Or TV shows, or someone would be like, this is happening now.
Yeah.
Just describing it.
Something like Jericho Mile, the Michael Mann TV film that we covered on this show, and we covered as a bonus. And
Right.
We were
If you made a really good TV movie like that.
They put it in theaters.
Yeah.
The Ewok movies got theatrical releases. The Battlestar Galactica pilot got a theatrical release.
Really good
The best movies. But, we have a lot of international listeners, and sometimes they'll be like, why aren't you covering this as a legitimate film? It got a legitimate release here. It was presented to us as a movie.
Right.
And I think for us, a lot of it is, how was the thing intended?
Right.
Right? In its construction, its conception. What did they think this was? And Duel is this kind of odd example where, and we'll back up and we'll get into this more in depth, but he makes this TV movie that's basically his second TV film. Or I guess third in a way. We'll get into this. But airs on TV, is kind of a smash success. Almost immediately, there's a desire to release it in Europe. It is 75 minutes long. They're like, this is a little too short. So he shoots new footage.
Yeah, basically 15 extra minutes.
So the cuts are not wildly different, but they are different.
They are different.
And there's a whole second round of shooting to kind of amp it up to theatrical level. Him coming back to it even a little bit stronger as a filmmaker.
Sure.
Then that goes to Europe and then eventually gets a theatrical release. And since then, there's been ongoing debate of, do you count this as his first movie or not? And I'm with you, David. I think this counts as his first movie.
I do too. But I do prefer the TV cut. Is that controversial? I kind of just don't need the extra stuff. Just leave me in the, leave me, tight. I like it tight.
We can get into this.
I don't hate the extra stuff.
Yeah.
I just don't think you really need it.
Did you get the 4K Steelbook?
No, I didn't get the 4K Steelbook. I'm struggling.
Kind of a rookie. You're struggling right now?
Yeah, I'm just watching movies on my phone while I burp a child. I'm doing my best over here.
You know what helped put those twins to sleep?
What?
A clean 4K transfer of Steven Spielberg's Duel.
You're saying the movie's boring?
No, I'm saying your twin sons would sense the relaxation that comes from being in the hands of a master.
Yeah.
Even at his earliest stages, they'd go, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. He knows how to make a picture.
Right.
And they immediately honk shoe, honk shoe.
And what more soothing sound than the sound of a truck horn?
I was watching it here in the office before we recorded, right? I got my 4K in here. It looks incredible. It's a beautiful transfer. Ben, would you mind moving this chair a little bit so my remote signal can hit? Just move that chair a tiny bit. This is the thing I want to show you, because this caused a lot of controversy in the nerdiest corners of physical media online debate, okay? This beautiful 4K transfer.
A bucical 4K.
It's a bucical 4K transfer. A lot of people like you prefer the TV cut. And they were like, okay, perfect 4K restoration, really treated with respect of the theatrical cut of the movie. And then they listed special features.
There's the TV version.
That's included. Great.
It says it's in HD.
You have your options. Yeah, so it's not in 4K, it's in HD. Then you play this. It is the worst AI, quote-unquote, restoration.
Oh, no.
It is basically unwatchable.
Whoa, yeah.
I'm going to fast forward to a point of movement so you can see this and we can get your reaction live. But there's like...
The car's moving. Oh, I got some credits going here. It's a nice car. I know it's like
nice
kind
car.
of a,
nice car, evil
broken
truck.
down old Plymouth or whatever it is.
You can see a little of how waxy it looks.
Does look a little shiny.
And it feels like they took a standard def file and wanted it to say it was HD, so they tried to upscale it. But the way they did that was just...
Ew.
Right?
Oh, it looks very odd.
And it gets worse as it goes along. It looks like it has some weird Photoshop filter on it.
It does. Like his face looks too smooth.
Yes. But then the outline of the silhouette of his profile is really strong. There's a black line as if it looks like it's posterized.
Yeah. Bit odd.
Yeah. It gets worse as it goes along, unsurprisingly, as it extends into proper
Right.
action.
Oh, wow.
Like, right.
Yeah, wait, what's going on here?
It's insane. It's one of
I'm
those.
almost like, is our projector broken? Like, that's what it's making me think.
Look
Or
at the sign in the back.
It
Yeah.
looks like like 3D glasses
without the
footage.
glasses. It looks
Without
like
the
there's
footage.
Vaseline
Or
on
with the
Right.
It's
There's
so
different
weird.
problems every
What
30
the
seconds.
fuck is going
But it
on?
sucks because basically it's like this should exist in a valid form as its own valid.
I mean, even if you just want to show it to me in, just standard like TV, like fine.
This is my point. It's genuinely better to just watch a shitty YouTube version of it than watch this.
Right.
Yeah.
Turn it off.
Yeah. No, let's keep it playing so we can give ourselves headaches. David, let's crack open the dossier. Wait a second. It's only one line and it says, go watch The Fablemans. JJ, you are fired.
No, I'm going to open the dossier so we can talk about an under-discussed figure in American cinema, Steven Spielberg. Steven Allen Spielberg, Griffin.
Well,
Did you know that?
You learn something new every day.
Like Michael Cera in Barbie. He was Alan.
He was Alan.
Born December 18th, 1946.
Okay.
Did you know that?
No.
What's his sign?
Of course, that would make him a Sagittarius.
Oh, totally. That makes
What
so
a
much
Sag.
sense.
So 1941 was a prequel.
Yeah, he was.
To his birth.
To his birth, sure. Born in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, apparently there's been some controversy over his birthday because it's often recorded as happening in 1947.
Okay.
Which is something that Spielberg, I think, sort of maybe helped massage the truth about to get out of a contract. Doesn't
Interesting.
matter. This is not important, JJ.
Was he maybe pretending to be older
He was
when
pretending
he started
to
his
be-
career?
Yes. But
he
I
was-
think he used
yeah.
it. He basically pretended to be a year younger to get a contract dismissed.
Okay.
Or like he pretended to be, I don't know.
Whatever.
It doesn't matter. Steven Spielberg, born to parents Arnold and Leah. No, I'm sorry. No, to parents Paul Dano and Michelle Williams.
Yeah, there we go.
Um,
JJ. Big whiff on your part.
and Arnold, of course, Paul Dano went to high school with Leah's brother Bernie.
Uh-huh.
So that's how they knew each other. They started dating after high school.
Okay.
And Leah, of course, was a musician. She went to the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music.
Mm-hmm.
Arnold was in the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
They got married after the war. And Leah,
Mm-hmm.
was planning to be a concert pianist.
Yes.
But she stopped doing it and had four kids.
Mhm.
She has Stephen and three girls, Anne, Sue, and Nancy.
Mhm.
And of course, as we know, they moved to New Jersey and there was like a tornado there and it was all very metaphorical.
Mhm.
And eventually they ended up in Arizona. And, it was to get away from the Seth Rogen
Yes.
because he was so sexy and hot.
Yeah.
I'm just doing the fable.
In a non-threatening way.
In a kind of a friendly way, but still like there's a real tension there.
No, I mean, look, it's what JJ even reached out to us and was like, do you guys mind if I spend more time than usual trying to prepare this first dossier? Because he was like, it's actually harder for me to pin down the pre-movie career Spielberg story than I thought it would be.
Right.
And I think part of that is because he was kind of tight-lipped about his personal life.
Until more recently when he finally got into it? Or no?
I mean, there was a lot of him speaking in very general terms and then people inferring a lot from his films, right? So there was like, well, clearly this guy never got over his parents' divorce.
Right.
And then I feel like there was a lot of psychoanalyzing from him. And then when they did the HBO documentary, whatever that was,
Yeah, like
6 or 7 years
exactly.
ago,
Yeah, I remember.
he started talking more openly about his relationship with his parents.
And his
then-
parents are in that documentary
Yes.
together,
Right.
being very sweet with each other, but talking about obviously
Yes.
Seth Rogen and
Yes.
like that one time she had the monkey and all
Right.
that stuff.
And Seth Rogen's like, why am I getting dragged into this? I never met the woman. The impression fell apart
it
really fast.
really fell apart. What the
I had it for like
fuck?
2 seconds, maybe.
An early memory, of course.
But then Fablemans, of course, like,
is the film he made.
yes, unpacks more of it. But also, we should acknowledge Fablemans is a fictionalized movie.
It is. It's.
It's consolidated. It's dramatized.
But I think it's
a lot
because,
of it's close.
for
yes.
example, he remembers the first film he attended is The Greatest Show on Earth.
Sure.
Where he, saw the circus on screen,
Yeah.
and he was freaked out. Right, the
Yes.
train wreck. Jimmy Stewart is the clown.
It is,
As he puts
yes.
it, I was disappointed by everything after that. I didn't trust anybody. I never felt life was good enough, so I had to embellish it. It begins his obsession with Hollywood storytelling.
This is the thing that I think, and certainly we've talked about a lot, but Fableman's provided such an effective codex for me and understanding him in a way I hadn't before.
Yeah.
Is like, oh, the kind of like core truths of this guy are: one, he is like hypersensitive and feels things really deeply. Two, the only way he knows how to process those things is through filmmaking. And three, he is kind of scared by how effective he is at manipulating other people's emotions through filmmaking. That his like prodigious gift is something he doesn't quite understand and that he always feels a little guilty about.
Speaking of his parents, obviously, as well, the two sides of Spielberg. His father, the technician, precise, computer obsessed. You know, he was in that movie Ruby Sparks.
Of course.
And then his mother, right?
Yeah.
Sort of the Dawson's Creek of the family in a way, right? Artistic.
Used to date Eddie Brock.
sensitive.
That's a big failing of The Last Dance, right?
That she's just not in it or
Reed
talked
Scott
about.
should be in it. There are a lot of problems with that movie, but I put that chief among them.
They don't even try to address her absence, right? Steven Spielberg's mother's absence from Venom 3.
Yeah, they don't. They're not mentioned.
I'm sorry about Venom.
Hey, David, I'm sorry about Venom.
Spielberg remembers at a young age his dad coming home with a transistor and showing it to his children and being like, this is the future. And Spielberg says that he took it and put it in his mouth and swallowed it. And he remembers this as this kind of like confrontation. Like he was trying to be funny, but it was very tense. Spielberg says it's as if I was saying, that's your future, but it doesn't have to be mine, which is funny to think about because I do feel like Spielberg is seen as a cutting edge filmmaker when it comes to technology.
Yes.
For pretty much his whole career.
Yes.
Like, it's not like Spielberg is a guy who like takes a while to catch up to shit. He's usually breaking through some big barrier if he's making like a, bigger scale movie.
Yeah, he's also talked a lot as an adult, I think, especially since his father passed away.
Yes.
And he's felt more comfortable talking about his parents without fear of upsetting
Both
them.
his parents died at the age of like 1 billion. Like, they both have these like long lives, which is great.
Hey, fantastic.
Like, his dad was 103 when he died.
And his mom was like 100?
Yeah, and they were right. So
but he said that, I think his father did not totally know how to relate to people.
She's 97.
He was like a genius.
Yes, very smart, but
didn't know how to relate to people, but was like in a time where people didn't understand what he was so good at. And Spielberg's like, if he were born 10 years later, he would have been a wildly successful, publicly hailed genius.
Right, just maybe slightly early for the computer age or whatever.
He was too early without being a pioneer in terms of discovering the basic building blocks of the thing, where he was one of the first people to understand it and know how to do it well, but was like a little too late to be the groundbreakers and a little bit too early to be the people who knew how to evolve it. And he just kind of became a journeyman computer guy.
Right.
In the field that then ultimately would end up like ruling the world. He was born at the exact wrong time to just be a kind of like drone, a well-paid, high-level drone.
Meanwhile, his mother, apart from appearing on Dawson's Creek, is just like very energetic, childlike. He describes her as this kind of like, musical person in all these ways and like, kind of never grew up in a way. And, it's all, just watch The Fabelmans.
I should also mention that on top of his dad being a computer genius.
Both parents also, by the way, just say like, Steven, intense kid. Like, it's as much as he has mythologized his parents so much, they're both like, he was really a lot. Like, he was a really intense kid and kind of tough to wrap your brain around.
This is what I'm saying about like, the whole slam on Spielberg for a long time that I'm sure will comment on as we like read the reviews and such at the time these wildly successful films got released, right? Is he's like Peter Pan syndrome, overgrown child, doesn't engage with the adult world, is just making hollow entertainment. He's like a slick showman, but he's like dumbing down culture. And this guy is like avoiding adulthood and reality. And I think, once again, the movie The Fabelmans makes it very clear that part of this complex is that he was like brought into an adult world prematurely and burdened with like his parents' problems in a way that I think kind of bifurcated him, right? In one way, he's like too aware of the adult world from too young an age and then feels the need to escape and look back and all this other stuff. But it also feels like he was a kid who felt things way too intensely as a child, was very burdened by like, you know, a sort of like fear of reality. And it makes sense that like the ability to control the universe around him and make these stories that are these ecstatic expressions of emotions in sort of novel, entertaining ways isn't avoidance as much as it's, as I was saying before, processing.
He was intense. There's a lot of stories about it. Anyway, in 1957, you watch The Fabelmans. They moved to Arizona. Spielberg says his most formative time, he's lived there from the age of 9 to 16. Leah, his mom, Michelle, doesn't want to move there.
Right.
Sees it a bit of a barren wasteland. So she's really struggling at that point.
Sure. His dad's best friend was dating a porn star next door, and it turned out that he had a surprisingly large penis.
What movie is that?
Girl Next Door.
But who?
I thought if I said Next Door, the Paul Dano character.
Oh, right. I forgot he's in that.
His character's name is Klitz.
I haven't seen that movie in 20 years.
I regret to inform you it's a 10 out of 10 masterpiece.
Oh, is that right? Is that so?
You know who endorses that take?
I don't.
One Steven Spielberg.
Oh, he loves The Girl Next Door?
Actually loves The Girl
He likes
Next Door.
Luke Greenfield's the whatever.
He wrote Luke Greenfield a letter when he watched it.
When he moves to Arizona, what does Spielberg get his hands on?
A camera.
A camera.
A movie camera.
Filming trains crashing together and his mom dancing around.
Taking control of his own universe.
Yes.
Documenting, reconstructing, reverse engineering, all of it. It's the tool for him to make sense of everything.
His family was Jewish, but what he calls storefront kosher. I think probably similar.
Can we double check that?
I think probably similar to the family my mom grew up in, where it's like, you know, they were a Jewish family. They went to, you know, they did all this stuff.
Right.
But they were also this like very American post-war family that was trying to assimilate and, you know.
My dad's family was incredibly similar. But this is also
so you get your bar mitzvah, you go to synagogue, you keep kosher in the sort of like, you know, kind of like straightforward way, not in like the mega intense way.
Well,
but, you know.
The post-World War II thing of like, Jews wanting to be American above all else, but they're never going to overcome being perceived as Jewish above all else by everyone else around.
Comes up in The Fabelmans a couple times. Good movie. Check it out.
Yeah.
We're
going to put footnotes on this episode in the episode notes that are just watch The Fabelmans.
It truly
27
is
times.
when you read so much of this stuff is kind of like LOL, watch The Fabelmans.
Yeah.
He had a bully who treated him like shit when he was like 13 years old, and he cast him at that age in a war movie he made called Escape to Nowhere, because he would make all these little movies with his friends, and like that won the kid over. So Spielberg is using the power of movies to, you know, be friends with people.
In The Fabelmans, the bullying is they call him Bagelman, right? And they put a bagel in his locker. And when we did that episode, we were discussing like, what do you think the actual thing was they were saying to Spielberg?
Right.
And I think JJ dug up that it was Spielbug. They used to make fun of him for looking like a bug.
Damn. So then he Brundleflied their ass.
He did.
He went into a teleporter.
He went to his dad and he's like, you know, you're good at that computer stuff.
As he's a teenager, he has some family in the LA area, sneaks onto the Warner Brothers lot, sees the making of the movie PT 109, which I think is the dramatization of
correct, the Cliff Robertson JFK
John Kennedy's war service.
A pretty solid movie.
Sure.
Yeah.
In 1963, he gets brought onto the Universal lot by Chuck Silvers, who will be important later. In 1964, he makes a feature-length movie called Firelight. He premieres it at a theater in Phoenix. I think he, you know, makes $500 or whatever. There's a whole story about it.
But
this
is 2.5 hours long. It has never been publicly consumable.
Not viewable except for some little snippet that he's made public.
I mean,
but this is right when his parents divorce.
Okay.
Michelle moves back east. Or no, they move to California, and that's when the divorce happens. Right, that's what it is.
I was going to say, we had talked about wanting to do a Spielberg Shorts episode on Patreon. It feels like Amblin is the only one of them that's properly watchable, which is basically his last short film before he becomes a professional director. I always thought they were more out there because you'd sometimes see clips of them played in like documentaries and retrospectives and stuff, but he doesn't let the full versions out there.
Yeah.
There's also the weird, very Fabelmans-esque sort of origin story of he asked two film-obsessed kids in his neighborhood once he was successful in the 80s and 90s who were making their own films, hey, can you work on restoring my old Super 8 films, which Spielberg retained?
Right.
And those two kids, I believe, were Matt Reeves and J.J. Abrams.
Right. That is true. They've like sifted through his,
Right. So these things have been like restored and preserved, but Spielberg doesn't let people see them in full.
Yet. So he moves to California. I think that's where he was the most bullied, but it's also where he gets the most into movie making and stuff. He wanted to go to USC or UCLA, which are the big film schools out there back then, especially. Doesn't get in because he has bad grades. Instead, he goes to California State College at Long Beach, which does have like some film courses, but isn't really anything so, robust enough. So he just starts sneaking onto the lot. He starts working as a production assistant on the John Cassavetes film Faces.
A big kind of turning point for him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's watching how Cassavetes treats the cast, he's obviously seeing one of the great American filmmakers work. That's very interesting. So then
he's also seeing like one of the great American filmmakers figure out his style, and his style is trying to tear down
how movies are sort of workmanlike Hollywood
he's
thing.
Seeing the actual guts of the process of everything. And there are varying stories about like, did Cassavetes fire him? Did Spielberg quit? Like Cassavetes, by all accounts, kind of took a liking to him,
right,
and said some impactful words to him. And the story gets like muddy in terms of what exactly happened, but it felt like Cassavetes clocked that Spielberg had a lot going on in his head and seemed to have a lot of gumption and drive.
He tries to make a little bicycling drama called Slipstream, meets Alan Davio on that movie, who will shoot a lot of great Spielberg films, but they never finished it. Then he makes Amblin, a 26-minute film that he shot on 35 millimeters. That is sort of his turning point where he presents that. We're actually going to cover it because you can see that one. We'll cover that on the Patreon very soon.
January 11th.
Right in a few days.
Yeah.
But he presents that and gets a deal at Universal, essentially.
That short is him basically intentionally trying to make something that can be a proof of concept, sell real. Like, it's him trying to level up from his childhood short films.
Right.
To, like, this is a calling card. Yeah.
Doesn't get an Oscar nomination for Best Short.
Wow.
Something of a snub. But it's well regarded. Goes
he, of course,
to Sidney
names his company after it eventually.
Yes, he does.
Yes.
He goes to Sidney Sheinberg, who is the VP of television production at Universal, basically the most powerful person he has any connection to through this Silvers guy.
The Silvers guy is the guy that Greg Grunberg plays in Fabelmans, who was...
I'm sorry. His name is Greg Grunberg.
Sorry.
I'm seeing
but am I wrong about that?
I think you're right.
The guy who worked on Hogan's Heroes, who was like a distant relative of his. Right? Yeah.
And he goes to meet with Sid. And he's like, Sid's like, well, what do you want to do? How would you like to go to work professionally? He's basically like, sign this contract. You'll do some television. If you do a few TV shows, maybe you can make a feature film.
There were a lot of apocryphal stories for
a 7-year contract with Universal.
A long time of Spielberg literally like sneaking onto the lot and holding up an abandoned office.
He put his name on an abandoned office.
Right. The Catch Me If You Can-esque thing, which I think I repeated in Catch Me If You Can episode we recorded 8 years ago.
Sure.
But it sounds like a lot of that was overstated, that Spielberg was himself trying to, I don't know, blow up the mythology.
Right.
Of his early beginnings and make it sound
like he was a sort of Leonardo DiCaprio-esque rapscallion.
Yeah.
Who was banging broads and
much like the real Frank Abagnale.
Kind of probably made some of that shit up.
He was like sneaking his way into a prodigious start, but also then told a story that was even more extreme than the reality. Right. Yes.
So what does he work on? He works on a little short called Eyes for NBC's Night Gallery, which is a Rod Serling sort of follow-up to Twilight Zone.
It's what if Spooky Art Gallery and every piece of art inspired. We'll cover that on the Patreon. But the pilot of Night Gallery is like a 90-minute airing in a 2-hour block, 3 30-minute segments. And one of them is Spielberg's first official studio directing job.
Right, which he made with Joan Crawford,
Yep.
a legendary Hollywood figure. And he says she treated me like I knew what I was doing, and I didn't, so I loved her for that. So they had a nice time. But he thought Rod Serling's script was bad as much as he loves Rod Serling. He was like, it was not his best work.
I'd agree with that, but
And he
it's
kind of
also...
looked at the script and went to Scheinberg and was like, Jesus, like, can I do something about young people, not like an old lady? And Scheinberg was like, take the job. Like, just do work, So
As much as it's not one of Sterling's best scripts, and we'll talk about this on Patreon, it is kind of a perfect piece for Spielberg to just test out his visual language.
Famously, Joan Crawford called MCA, Lou Wasserman, the head of Universal, and said, like, this nice young man directed me just now. I am Joan Crawford, and I want to say I thought he had a lot of talent.
Right. It's this
So-
fascinating, like, Crawford being in this is kind of a, like, last rung on the ladder before, like, death, sort of like How the Mighty Have Fallen kind of thing.
Yeah, sure.
But what happened to so
She
many
would've
of
been, like,
these...
the late 60s.
Right. Like, I mean, so many of the classic movie stars would retire when they were like 50 or 60 and spend the last 15 or 20 years of their life not working. And if you did work, by and large, you'd end up being like TV guest star kind of things like this. And it felt like, you know, they're making a big deal out of like, we got this person, but it does feel like they're sort of a relic in a museum to a certain extent. But like, she has enough legendary status that even though her career doesn't have a ton of weight, her calling these studio heads and similar people and saying like, I just worked with this kid and he's got the goods,
Right.
does make everyone take notice.
And yet he kind of struggles to pick another project or get something else done after that. Supposedly, he wanted to make a movie about Thomas Crapper, the inventor of the flush toilet, based on a book called Flush with Pride, the story of Thomas Crapper. His agent says...
I'm sorry, Ben, can we pause the
absolutely not.
recording quickly just so I can personally option the rights to that book? If we could just hold for 5 minutes.
Y'all know about Thomas Crapper?
I fucking didn't.
You
And
didn't?
Guess what? I'm ready to formally announce that I will be directing Crapper, the Thomas Crapper story.
Famous people think that Thomas Crapper is like the etymology of the word crap. But
It's
apparently
completely
that's like
coincident.
not true, and like the word crap has existed as like Old English to mean like kind of, you know, whatever, something like rubbishy
So was him
for like millennia or whatever.
creating the flushable toilet basically him trying to take back the word?
Yes, maybe that was it.
People,
Oh, yeah?
kids have been mocking me my whole life. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to be the one who gets rid of crap faster than you've ever seen. That crap is gone.
Another thing he starts working on is The Sugarland Express, a film that he will eventually make, but he's not. We're talking late 60s at this point. He goes to Sid Sheinberg and says, can I go write? No one wants me anyway.
Yeah.
Write some movies.
We should say he does another segment in that first season of Night Gallery.
I guess so.
He's,
It's not
I'm
mentioned
telling you,
here.
I'm
It's
telling
just
you for a
not
fact
mentioned
he-
here.
I'm just
so
telling you for a fact he did.
maybe that came later then, because I'm trying to understand what this kind of, you know, pause that he went on is, because he's really complaining about. Yeah, that wasn't until 71.
Oh, interesting.
So that's a little later, right?
Okay.
He goes off and he writes some stuff. He wrote apparently a dogfight movie, like a World War II movie.
Okay.
He wrote a comedy about life in the Catskills. Love to see that.
It was also called Crapper.
Yes, he wrote something called Ace Eli, funny,
Thank
and
you.
Roger of the Skies, which does exist, and he has a story credit on. Never seen it.
Oh, interesting. I feel like JJ texted me about this if I had ever seen it before, because it's like one of the only...
It's like a adventure movie with Cliff Robertson again about
Yes.
a pilot. I don't know.
I feel like Spielberg has gone out of his way to distance himself from it to the extent that I had never heard about it until JJ texted me about it.
He disowns whatever the movie was.
Yes.
He's like, that's barely, you know, I got a story by credit because that's how it goes, but they had changed it by the time they made it.
Yeah.
He comes back to Universal, and then he does another segment of Night Gallery, some TV shows,
there we
Marcus Welby, MD, The
Yes.
Psychiatrist, an episode of this show called The Name of the Game, called LA 2017, that you've been trying
Now,
to
this
find.
is the thing I love. It used to be on YouTube in full. It's now seemingly gone,
we'll hunt
taken
around
down by
for it.
Universal. But Name of the Game was a weird, sort of, I think they call it a carousel show. That was this old format that used to exist to lure more substantial stars into doing television without the commitment of doing 22-episode seasons. They design a show where it's like, it has 3 different leads. And it
Right.
cycles between a couple different casts. So each of these stars only has to do 7 or 8 episodes a season, right? So it's already this show that's not an anthology, but is a little like piecemeal like that.
Right.
And then there is just this one episode that Spielberg directed that's ostensibly a complete standalone, basically outside of a framing device, has nothing to do with the rest of the series, and is just a weird dystopian future movie. It is the first feature-length thing he ever directed. It was 75 minutes long.
Sure.
It's called LA 2017. It rules.
You've seen it.
I've seen it. I saw when because it went up on YouTube a couple years ago, and people were like, this is kind of secretly Spielberg's first movie.
Cool.
And it's a little lost to time. That show just is kind of completely forgotten. It's never been released on DVD or streaming or rentable digitally or any of that stuff. And there was this one YouTube video that now Universal has taken down.
Of course, he also directed the first regular season episode of Columbo, not the pilot, as people sometimes, the pilot had already been made, but it's the first episode.
Yes.
Once Columbo goes to series, and it's, of course, called Murder by the Book.
Similarly, 75 minutes. It's like that's the
feature-length-ish, but it's a Columbo.
Right. It's TV movies that will air within a 90-minute block. And Duel was intended to be the same kind of thing.
When he's hired to shoot his episode of Columbo, Oscar-winning cinematographer Russell Meddy, who had shot Spartacus, and I think was a bit of a hard ass because he fought with Kubrick on that movie, who's Kubrick famously easy to get along with, said, he's a kid. Does he get a milk and cookie break? Is the diaper truck going to interfere with my generator?
I mean, funny.
Pretty funny.
It's pretty funny.
But generally, he impresses people. When he works on these TV shows, he kind of just blows people away. Peter Falk said, like, we had some good fortune making Columbo. Like, our first episode was directed by fucking Steven Spielberg. Like, obviously he's not famous then, but now you're kind of like, dang.
David?
Yeah?
You know for a fact that's not how he said it.
Let's face it. We had some good fortune
David?
at the beginning. Go ahead.
Just come in
Do
a little
Falk.
harder.
I can't do Falk.
Well, you had some good luck. Fucking Steven Spielberg.
I don't know why my Falk sounds like the oldest version of Bob Dylan.
The thing he remembers,
One more thing.
the thing Falk remembers is that, like, they're shooting one scene where he approaches someone on the street. They shoot it, and he's like, where's the camera? And Spielberg is like, he realizes, like, across the street with a long lens. And he's like, that's not something you did on television.
Yeah, it's this fucking TV show, kid.
Right.
Time to make the donuts. Yeah.
Spielberg considers his best work to have been an episode of The Psychiatrist.
Interesting. So maybe we need to watch it.
I don't fucking know. Anyway.
I'm not saying we need to devote episode time to it, but maybe we should watch it.
It's a job, though. Making these TV shows is a job. It's not an art form for him. He doesn't have the passion. Obviously, he's, the stories are more schematic. He has to work in a tight schedule and all that. He really wants to make movies. On to Duel. Richard Matheson, famous writer. Would you call him a famous writer?
Yeah, what else would he call?
I don't know.
Legendary writer?
I mean, he is pretty legendary in that he wrote I Am Legend.
This is true.
Heard of it?
Yeah. But was this whole generation of guys who were like incredible short story writers, would write longer length things as well, but like incredible short story writers
a lot of
who
Twilight
then
Zones.
went to Hollywood.
Right. Apparently, the day that JFK was assassinated, he was golfing, and he drives home, and he gets harassed by a big truck.
Okay.
And this experience...
The second most tragic thing that happened that day.
This experience has him write down on, like, the back of an envelope, like, story idea, truck chases man on highway.
But that's how all these guys worked, where they were just like, you just fucking sit at the typewriter every day and you write 8,000 pages.
Right. And then
like
you write
any
these
half
stories.
idea, you sell it to Playboy. Which this original story ran in Playboy magazine.
He pitches it to, TV people, and they think it's a little too limited, not enough there. He gives up on it, writes it as a short story.
In Playboy magazine.
Well, I only read Playboy for the naked pictures, so I never noticed the article.
This is the problem. Apparently, Playboy magazine has words in it.
As someone who, I will confess, has never really read an issue of Playboy. Like, I know the old joke was I read it for the articles, right? And Playboy had genuinely great journalism and all that. Was it like kind of just at the back of the magazine, or was it kind of interspersed? Or like, Ben doesn't know.
When I was in high school,
as a Penthouse guy,
I was born after one fucking read spanky magazines.
Well, look, I also think by the time we were growing up, Playboy was the articles had less juice to them.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But I think Playboy, even in the 90s, would still have these glitzy writers. And
Yeah, we have like Leonard Maltin doing like serious interviews with
Right.
people and shit. When I was in high school, Lola Kirk, past and future guest on this show, was like, "You're a horny boy. I'm giving you a vintage issue of Playboy for your birthday as a present." For birthday. I had one vintage issue of Playboy that I hid in my closet.
Nice.
That I remember having a multi-page Lainey Kazan spread.
Hey.
Where I was like, this is kind of weird to look through when My Big Fat Greek Wedding's only like 2 years out of theaters.
Sure.
But that was like a 60s issue of Playboy that I would leaf through and genuinely go like, oh, this did actually used to have good articles.
Sure. No, I'm sure it did.
It felt
including
more like
Richard Matheson's Duel.
Right. It felt like New Yorker with like nudie spreads and some hornier shit.
Yes.
Yes.
So it goes into Playboy, and people notice it.
Mm-hmm.
Steven Bochco, Steven Bochco, right?
Sure.
Famous TV writer.
Yes.
Is like, this should be a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Brings it to the attention of a TV producer. ABC Universal has a deal with ABC to make, TV movies.
Yeah, these slots existed of just like TV movie of the week, and they're making tens of TV movies every year. So they're looking for old things that could be remade for TV, ripped from the headline stories, short stories, original scripts from budding writers.
Right.
There's just like, there are slots to fill. TV movies are going to get made.
When are they programmed?
Primetime.
Like primetime, yeah.
Yeah.
Movie of the
Like
week,
all these channels would have their own movie of the week slot, and they'd be competitive slots. It'd be like one network airs a movie every Monday night at 8 or whatever. They'd be among the highest rated things, but it also was kind of like a way to establish a farm team, to like test out new directors and writers and things like that, to test out new stars. Also like stars they had under contract on long running shows who were frustrated being pigeonholed into one role. It was like, oh, we'll let you do a TV movie. You stay under our umbrella and you get to flex some other side of yourself.
So it makes its way to Spielberg. His secretary at the time, Nona Tyson, throws a Playboy in front of him. Spielberg says he starts laughing.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, don't look at the girls. Read this short story. It's right up your alley.
Mm-hmm.
We should note that also at one point Spielberg met with David Lynch, and David Lynch told him the horizon needs to be this way or that way. And all that stuff happened as well. No,
it's a 2-year-old David Lynch.
Yes. Yeah.
I guess he was fucking 25, whatever.
And he's into it.
Mm-hmm.
He calls someone up and is like, I want to do this. I want to talk to you about it. He calls up the producer, George Eckstein. George Eckstein sees him as he was known, Spielberg at the time, as Scheinberg's Folly, right? What was ABC thinking, or Universal thinking, hiring this like child to this long contract, and now he's not doing much, right? Mm-hmm. Eckstein needs a director, so he's like, all right, come in for a meeting. Spielberg shows him some of the Columbo episode. Eckstein's like, you'll do, essentially. We need somebody. Initially, he's like, can we have no dialogue? Like, can it truly be silent?
Yeah.
And I think, at a certain point, ABC is like, there's not enough room for this kind of arty stuff, buddy. We can't do that. The movie might be even cooler with no dialogue. Certainly no internal dialogue.
Can I make my case?
Yes.
A lot of what's added for the theatrical cut are a lot of the like dialogue interludes of him interacting with other people.
Right. Him calling his wife.
Yes. Some of like the gas station stops and shit like that. Obviously not the bar scene, right?
Yeah.
I feel like, and I'm happy that Spielberg has not gone back and recut this movie, but I'm sort of like, it makes sense that they insisted on putting the certain amount of voiceover internal monologue stuff in here, because they were just like, you cannot have this be completely wordless.
Right.
In the version that has a couple dialogue scenes added, I'm like, if you then took out the voiceover, that's probably the perfect version of this movie.
I just think there's nothing in the voiceover and stuff that really tells you anything you don't already know.
No, I agree with that. And it's also just because you could get why on a writing level they were like, there needs to be some dialogue to keep people hooked.
Right.
What they couldn't have counted for is you're dealing with perhaps the greatest visual storyteller of his generation,
Right.
a guy who can figure out how to convey all of this just in images and editing. So, like, everything that's being said in the internal monologue, he's 24 at this point, 23? How old is he?
When he makes Duel, the film came out early. It'd be like 22.
Right.
22, yeah.
Right. You could just be like, if you're fucking Scheinberg or whoever, you're like, kid, there has to be some dialogue in this.
Right.
Right. And even just it's airing on TV with commercial breaks and whatever, people are going to turn off the TV. As you said, you're like flipping through the channels, you see it and you're like, what the fuck is this? Right.
Yeah.
Within that context, it makes sense. Once you've opened this thing up and let it breathe and you're like, we're going to play it in a theater and we can air it out. Every single thing that's happening visually underneath the voiceover parts completely conveys what the voiceover is saying.
Right.
Yeah.
I will say I agree with you. I think that's the perfect version.
Yeah.
But I would say what really puts it over the edge for me is if there was a moment where it freezed on the truck and then it said Truckus Meanus and then it froze on the Pontiac and it said like Pontiacus good is.
Ben, 1 trillion comedy points.
Thank you.
Here's another thing, Ben, in terms of just like what the ecosystem was for this sort of like TV movie of the week culture.
Yeah.
He was given 10 days to shoot this. He went over. It was 13 days.
Right.
And as a result of him taking the extra 3 days, he only had 10 days to deliver a cut to them.
Oh, man.
Like the turnaround on these things, because there just was one airing every week, was as if it was a TV show episode.
Basically.
Even though these were running as separate productions and they had their own stop and start and they weren't part of the factory line of an ongoing series, it was like, you delivered this to us in like less than a month from the moment we hire you.
Spielberg wants Gregory Peck.
Yeah.
An icon for him.
Uh-huh.
Peck says no. Not surprising. I think Spielberg knows that if he'd gotten Peck, maybe this could have leapt to the big screen. Certainly he would have gotten more than 10 days. They're not interested.
It also makes sense with his Joan Crawford history that he's starting to like strategize about like, I can gain some heat from proving myself to these legendary stars in their autumn years.
Right. And then they'll call people for me. And, yeah.
They'll see that I respect them and that I know what I'm doing and then they'll endorse me and whatever. Yeah.
But I feel like Dennis Weaver, who they cast,
is perfect in that.
Yeah, because you need someone who's a little nebbishy and kind of ground down. Like if it's Gregory Peck being like, there's goddamn trucks in my way, I'm like, no one's gonna fuck with him. Like George C. Scott, you know, like, Rah!
Weaver's characterization is fascinating because this is a thing that, like, to its credit, is not telling you too much about this guy.
Right.
And yet Weaver's performance is really specific where it doesn't feel like he's just a stand-in. And yet there's certain things about him that are a little hard to pin down.
For sure.
This guy's like a weird combination of like a little arrogant and glib, but also kind of like nebbishy put upon.
Yeah, does this guy have an anger thing or is he kind of a little bit of a pushover?
He's
who's
like both at the same time in oscillation, which means that he's really compelling to watch because you kind of don't know how he's going to react in any given moment.
Now, Dennis Weaver, it was on a little TV show called Gunsmoke, which is at the time, like longest fucking running thing ever, right?
Right. And Simpsons is now like gone 20 years past
or whatever.
Right.
But more recently, he had sort of had a bit of a revival on this show, McCloud, which I have never seen, but it's an NYPD cop show where it's like...
Was that Darren McGavin? No.
I don't know. It's Dennis Weaver. He's McCloud.
But, okay, why do I think Darren McGavin was on the show as well?
Darren McGavin.
Weaver was McCloud.
Weaver was McCloud. Okay. Darren McGavin, I think the thing you're thinking of is... I don't know. Mike Hammer?
Maybe.
I don't know.
Who could fucking say, honestly?
McCloud is... It's like he's like an old kind of cowboy type cop from New Mexico.
Right.
And now he's in New York.
Yes.
So he's probably always like... You know, did a cow do this? And they're like, no, it's New York City, baby. Beep, beep. I assume that's what the vibe was.
Actually sounds like prime for a fucking reboot.
Kind of does.
Why are people not
like
fighting
Yellowstone
over
in New York?
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
It feels like modern day McCloud would kill.
Spielberg likes Dennis Weaver, who's got a little juice because of McCloud, because he's in Touch of Evil.
Right.
As the sort of sniveling night watchman.
Yeah, the motel attendant.
Right. So he's kind of like, maybe we can get a little of that energy in there.
The twitchy, kind of nervous. Yeah.
Weaver says his agent called him and said, they're going to send you a script. Say yes before you even read it. And Weaver was like, what? But then he got the script and he was like, yep, I get it. But it was hard to shoot this movie for him because it's all him driving and very little dialogue.
It also just bears repeating.
And it's a lot of him going like, the fuck? Should I get over?
David's doing an incredible performance right now. It just bears repeating. I know everyone listening probably knows this, but the Rio Grande line between television and film was so fucking thick at this point. Right? Like it was just in terms of like the class and esteem associated with the two. And especially for any actor, you really had to be strategic in these moves of like, which one are you?
Right.
If people started in film and then went to TV, it would be hard for them to make their way back. You know, and if you're a guy who was like doing smaller parts in film, but then became a leading man on TV, you know, it's like, is doing a TV movie doubling down, all this shit. I don't know.
It's a pre-Peacock world.
Thank you. That's an easier way of putting it. Yeah.
They look at a lot of cars. Casting the cars is kind of the biggest thing they have to do.
Yeah.
71 Plymouth Valiant and a 1951 Peterbilt for the truck. And they kind of customized the truck, I think, to make it look a little scarier. You know, it's all crudded up with brown
I was going to say,
paint.
by customizing, do you mean they just threw dirt on it?
They put bugs all over the windshield. They put some tanks on the doors, I think, to make it kind of have more of a face, you know? And so they wanted it to look like a monster. And
this truck looks perfect.
It looks incredible. I don't like that truck's vibe.
I hate it.
It also says like flammable on it or whatever. And you're like, ah.
Yeah. This is conjecture on my part. I admit this. Dennis Weaver is the star of a great Twilight Zone episode.
Which one?
It's called Shadow Play.
Oh, sure.
It's a guy trying to avoid the electric chair.
Right.
And just knowing how influential Twilight Zone was for Spielberg, and Weaver's in kind of a similar position in that, a guy who's trying to like figure out his way out of a seeming inevitability of death.
Right.
You know, I could see that also being another thing that factored into the soup for him.
So they make Duel. Spielberg insists on shooting it outside. They wanted to do soundstage.
Yeah.
And it's a big fight. And he went over schedule, as you say, 3 days over schedule.
Right, which is maybe the equivalent of going 3 weeks over schedule on a TV and on a real film, a feature film.
How could you do this on a soundstage?
It would look shitty.
It would
look
so
like a janky
bad.
TV movie. Yes.
But there's like, look, I love Twilight Zone, and a lot of Twilight Zone episodes are very ambitious in terms of what they're aiming to depict, because that is a show that didn't have like a home base kind of rotation of sets it could reuse. There's like a great Hitchhiker episode of Twilight Zone that all takes place on the road, and there's very little like real car footage.
Right.
And most of it is just like a close-up of an actor in front of a rear projection screen behind a picture car, you know?
Sure.
They're like, you could see how they were just like, look, don't overthink this. This isn't a real movie. Like Spielberg fighting to make this 50% more of a movie than they want it to be results in him over-delivering on the product, which then convinces them to be like, fuck, film some more and make this even more of a movie.
Right.
Yeah.
He's doing lots of master shots, less TV close-ups, he says. You know, he's trying to, be wider, make it feel more cinematic.
There's like crazy camera placements in this.
He's the king of blocking.
Yeah. But beyond that, king of blocking, obviously, right? It is like the weird kind of just like bone deep preternatural skill this guy had.
They call him
the king of movies. They call him the king of blocking. No, I was gonna say, beyond him just being great at blocking, there's shit where you're like, oh, the camera's like mounted to the grill.
Yes.
In this sort of like side profile shot of the truck with the car behind it and shit like that, where you're just like on a TV movie schedule, budget, resources, crew, you choosing to do a setup like that is like, you're going to have to sacrifice in exchange for putting your foot down and be like, I want this shot. I want a crane shot, you know? Like in exchange for doing that, the payoff is you get fewer setups somewhere else or fewer takes of each setup or whatever it is. But the guy just like he had the fucking vision.
But he shows the film to
Mhm.
ABC, and they're mad that the truck doesn't blow up
Mm-hmm.
because it says flammable,
Mhm.
right, on the truck. And they think about shooting a new ending that's more explosive.
Mm-hmm. Literally.
But no. Spielberg had said, like, I want more of like a slow death
Yeah.
where the truck kind of suffers and basically kind of like bleeds out.
I mean, it is an incredible shot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then Duel comes out. It's also got a really cool score. Obviously pre-John Williams for him, but Billy Goldenberg, sort of this like Bernard Herrmann, knockoffy kind of score.
Yeah. But I mean, John Williams starts on Sugarland and then is his guy save
Forever,
for
pretty much.
5 movies.
Yeah, save for just a couple times.
Yeah.
Duel gets rave reviews,
Mhm.
average ratings.
Mhm.
Richard Matheson says he was flabbergasted by how good it was.
Yeah.
And George Lucas has this story of he was at a party at Francis Ford Coppola's house. He'd met Steven Spielberg maybe, but they didn't know each other that well yet. And he's like, the movie's on, that movie he made. And they're watching it. And then like at this party, everyone starts to like lock in on the movie.
Yeah.
Like instead of just checking in with it, like everyone just sits down and watches it because they were like, this is really fucking good.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm gonna throw out a take here.
Go ahead.
This isn't a perfect film, right?
Yeah.
In its best sequences, it is just like astonishing.
Agreed. I mean, which is basically all
And not just its
vehicular
loudest
stuff.
sequences.
No,
right?
but it's mostly when you're on the road. I would say.
But some of the construction of some of the sequences, you're just like, how the fuck is this guy's first movie? Not only is it just the level of skill, but you're like, most people, it takes 2 decades to cross the arc of developing the skill. Then they get ostentatious with their craft, and then they learn how to like pare it down and get Spartan and unshowy with it and just communicate.
Right.
A lot of people, it takes over 10 years to do that. And the first movie, he already has this confidence of like an old master. My big take is, I think you watch this, and in the construction of the big showcase moments, the big set pieces, the big sequences, whatever, I would contend like he arrived fully formed as an action filmmaker. He has better action sequences later in his career, but I'd argue those are largely a product of he knows how to build a better movie around those sequences. He has better resources and collaborators. He has better tools to play with and more time and whatever. I don't actually think his basic craft and understanding of how to put images together to create tension and excitement
Right.
evolves past this. Like, I think
Right. You're basically like
he was
he's
fully
as,
formed.
He's as good then as he was now.
It was
by and
basically
large.
everything else rose to his level.
And I think he says like he watches Duel all
Yes.
the time and is kind of like, yeah, I fucking crushed it.
He now like studies Duel trying to be like, how did
What
I
did I do
this?
here? Right. Exactly.
Because I think it was also in such a state of panic where he has to put this together so quickly with such limited resources, but also he knows like this is his big chance to show himself,
yeah.
that this movie almost comes out of like just like a flow state for him.
Yeah.
As much as it was meticulously storyboarded and everything, he was just like, I just knew exactly how I had to make it. And he just kind of like put his foot down and got it done. And he proved his fucking point. Like it totally worked in the way he needed it to.
Yeah, it's a great movie. I saw Duel
Mhm.
on TV, I think on the BBC. The
Wow.
BBC. When I was 14 or 15 years old.
Yeah.
And I had my Empire Magazine Spielberg edition. Empire Magazine put out a special
Mhm.
Steven Spielberg edition once that had all of his movies, like with 2 pages devoted to them, whatever. And so
Yeah.
that's probably when I first learned about Duel. Oh, did you know, like before E.T. or whatever, he made this TV movie. And I remember watching it, like seeing it in the listings and being like, I want to watch it. I'm a young cinephile.
Yeah.
And then watching it and being like, that rocked. And feeling really proud of myself for like having done that.
My parents did not like Steven Spielberg. They were,
Newman's fucking up again.
I know. In the 90s, I think they were, that was a very popular time for people to kind of turn against Spielberg.
Yeah, 100%, of course. No,
Right.
once he wins the Oscar for Schindler, especially,
Yes.
I think people are like, it's like when the Red Sox won the World Series, where people are like, all right, can I stop
Enough.
hearing about you
Enough
now?
of
Yeah,
this.
like,
Right. Right. And he used to be good, but now he's so maudlin and so manipulative.
Yeah.
There was sort of a feeling of like, look, we can't deny Schindler, but everything else he's made in the last 10 years is a failure to recapture how good the first 10 years were.
Right.
And they were sort of like, by mid-90s, they were like, Spielberg's washed. But I remember within that, despite being a child who was shown E.T. and Close Encounters very young by my mother as like, these are important and having like a massive effect on me both. I remember saying to me, you know which one is good? His first movie.
Sure.
When she was in her sort of like Spielberg sucks phase. And because she grew up in Europe, humble brag, she must have seen Duel in theaters, presented as like a movie properly.
Well, we've already mentioned TV didn't exist.
TV didn't exist.
Right.
So yeah, I remember her telling me about it fairly young and just describing the premise in the way that kind of excited me as like, wait, and that's the whole movie? She was like, yeah, it's just a nervous guy and this truck starts following him. And I'm like, why? Like, you don't know. Who's driving the truck? You don't know.
Yeah.
It's just this guy going crazy and this truck coming after him and there's no explanation for it. And it's like thrilling. So I think, yeah, I probably rented it on VHS when I was 10 or 12 or something.
Cool.
Yeah, it rolls.
Ben, did you like it?
It's so impressive.
Yeah.
How much it's a movie.
Yeah.
And how much you're on the edge of your seat.
Yes.
But I think the first point, especially, that it's like, it doesn't feel like a TV movie, really.
No.
Partly because the limited scale makes sense. So you're not seeing it push against a budget it can't. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, it makes sense for it to be fairly stripped down.
Well, there's a focus to the story, but then he's pushing to expand the scale cinematically.
And he does.
Like,
all of my problems with it are just when it's him, kind of futzing around in various locations.
Yeah.
Not that I think those parts are bad. It's just the only time you kind of feel the movie trying to fill out time a little bit.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Like the confrontation in the diner. It's a diner, right?
Yeah.
With the guy he thinks is the trucker. It's just one of those scenes where you're like 10 seconds in, you're like, well, this isn't going to be the guy.
Sure.
We're halfway into the movie. He's not going to like go face to face with the truck driver.
Yeah.
And it just kind of goes on for like a few minutes of him being like, hey, buddy, can you cut it out? And the guy's like, what are you talking about? Hey,
but
should I call the cops?
The chunk of that sequence with him walking in and recognizing one of these guys must be the guy. And
that
there's basically 5 stellar minutes of just this guy looking at people, sizing them up, visually weighing the pros and cons of it could be this guy, it couldn't be this guy.
Looking at their boots.
I
think that's a really interesting way of like, how can I like read into a person through like, the way they have selected their boots, what color it is, how dirty it is.
And then he's running through the mental exercise of approaching each of these guys and confronting them and imagining how they'd react. Like all of that stuff is fucking incredible. And you have to think also in the theatrical cut, Ben, that's like the first sequence where he's talking at length.
Yeah.
Like because the opening, which I think is really good, the opening credit sequence in the theatrical cut of the POV of the car, that is all added. That was not part of the original TV broadcast. And I think is just like really immersive, sort of dropping you into the world. As much as that's the POV of his car, it's an interesting way to start in the perspective of a car on the road and get you into the headspace of a road movie and all of that. But then like the phone conversation with the wife is added for the theatrical. Like a lot of that early stuff is added. So the length of that scene and how long it goes on makes a little more sense if you think you're watching a broadcast that's been going on for 30 minutes and this is the first time that the movie's kind of stopping long enough to like settle you in.
The wife call I don't need. I definitely don't need that. Everything, the less the better, right? Like I don't want to know who's driving the truck.
I just don't think that stuff. I think
it's not bad.
I think to its credit, it's not too overstated.
No, it's not.
You can imagine the worst.
They had a
version
fight
of
or
it.
something.
Well, and the fight is about like him not standing up enough. It's like this guy's kind of just a drip.
It's a bit of a drip.
It's also there's stakes kind of in that he needs to be home in time because his parents are due at the house for dinner. So he's like expected to be home, and he already has had a fight with his wife.
I think his reaction to all this stuff characterizes him well. Like, it's not like, I don't think it's valuable like backstory shit.
Right.
Or like table setting in that way, but I do think you get a lot from seeing him react to some other shit before the truck really enters the picture of just like, this guy's just kind of annoying. He's not a bad guy. I think it's key that it's like, this guy didn't like, this isn't the manifestation of some curse on him.
Right.
This isn't his comeuppance.
He didn't run over a little toy truck.
Right? Like Matheson wrote a lot of Twilight Zone, and that's what differentiates this from a Twilight Zone or something like that. That there isn't this supernatural aspect to it. This isn't like a cosmic balancing. It's more just giving you a sense of why this guy is particularly ill-equipped to deal with a situation like this.
Right.
His personality defects are like a perfect stew to completely fall apart when face-to-face with this.
Right.
It's scary because of the random act of violence
Sure.
aspect to it.
But also that it's like meaningless. That's the scariest thing.
Beyond that, as a driver, and you're a driver too, Ben. Griffin's not a driver.
Debatable.
Just the weird.
I
He's
drive the
driving on the highway
conversation.
of life.
Yeah, and I drive the conversation.
That's right. And we're all kind of surfing the information superhighway.
This is true.
Sometimes I wish they'd put a speed limit on that thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right, but that's not drive. That's
Maybe do some paving.
I cite that as proof that I'm a surfer, not a driver.
But it is a highway.
Yeah, but I'm surfing.
You're right. It is weird that, right, they're like, we're going to call it the web, the spider web.
Yeah.
And you surf it. Why do you surf it? It doesn't matter.
Do you think if you said surf the web to anyone under the age of 20, they'd be flummoxed? Is that like
I think it would be like me being like, oh, hello, my baby. Like, or what, you know, it's just like, they'd be like, I guess I know what that is, but you sound like
See,
an
I wonder
old-timey
if they
man on a penny bicycle.
I wonder if they wouldn't even know what it was.
Maybe not.
And I'm like, that was the entire way that the internet was
Do they
talked
know
about for 25 years.
The web. Like even that. If I was like, oh, did you
Because-
find it on the web?
People say Web
a great
3.0 though a lot.
Yeah, you're right.
That term's thrown around enough that
The
I think
web.
people know.
web.
Now, if I'm saying it to the good madame, she would know.
Madame Web.
Yeah, she would know.
And we should, of course, acknowledge that her web connects us all.
And sometimes I do be surfing it,
Yeah.
watching it, hopefully on Peacock.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's
Holding
on,
an unopened Pepsi can.
with my red goggles. Is there Madame Web 2 this year?
Madame Web 2.0.
Yeah, can they just
I mean, first of all, the title's right there for the taking. I'd say, look, we're recording this episode in November. It will come out in January.
Yeah.
I would say the green light on Madame Web 2.0 largely depends on whether or not it gets the Best Picture nomination. We're all, in November, predicting it will.
We're all assuming, right, it'll squeeze in there.
But by the time it comes out in January, who knows how the fates have changed.
Right. Maybe like more than 10 films actually were released in 2024. That would hurt it.
Well-
if it turns out that there are more than 10 movies eligible.
Sony's crossing their fingers that the year is going to close
Maybe it'll
out
be
at
one of
9.
those years no one releases any movies.
No, I think, look, if I can
We're
be fair,
guaranteed a nom.
and maybe I'll sound foolish here. I'm making a bold prediction about the future. As far as I'm concerned, Sony has one of the 10 spots reserved. I think whether or not Madame Web makes it in is largely dependent on the response to Craven the Hunter.
Right. If the trap is set.
One of the 5 greatest trap artists in the history of humanity.
So, as a driver, that was my point, right? There is a sort of, like there's the kind of like rules of the road, right? And then when someone starts being aggro, or even just like crosses in front of you, cuts you off in a weird way, maybe they don't even mean to be aggro, but they're just doing whatever they're doing. It is kind of fundamentally creepier than normal because you can't talk to them. Right? You can beep your horn and you can go, hey, asshole, and like shake your fist out the window or whatever. But like you do start, if someone's being weird on the road, that immediate spiral of thoughts of like, what's going on with this car or truck or whatever. And trucks are scary. Driving with a truck is scary. If there's some big ass truck on the highway, I want to get away from it. I don't want to be near those things.
Can I contribute some non-drivers' thoughts to this conversation?
Yes.
Everything you just said are high up on the list, all of them, high up reasons for why I am terrified at the idea
You're scared
of
of
driving.
driving. Yes.
And I wonder how much seeing this movie at a young age also contributed to that. I don't think it was the formation of that.
There's lots of movies
But like
with
this
cars.
movie just depicts 10 things I think about a lot as like, why would I ever do that?
Yeah. I don't know if you
I
want to get somewhere.
I grew up in I think it's the most densely populated state.
New Jersey is very densely populated.
Garden State.
It's really
State
major car culture, lots of traffic, lots of road rage. Growing up, my dad warned me,
Yeah.
if someone is getting really crazy and out of sorts, do not fuck around.
Yeah, don't engage or just de-escalate or get out of there or whatever.
And there's so many of those stories too of a guy pulls a gun or a knife on someone, when they both pull off the road and engage each other.
For me, it's like I go through the Holland Tunnel, I'm smoking my cigar, and it's like the factories, and then we're in Newark, and there's like Pizza Land, right? And then it sort of starts to get more and more suburban.
This
And then
happens after you woke up this morning.
Yeah, and then I go up my driveway.
Got yourself a gun.
And it's kind of like this metaphor for like, how the times they are changing,
Right.
even in like the modern crime
You can take a
world.
quick stop at the Bada Bing.
Right.
The thing you're
You
saying.
ever been to Pizza Land?
I haven't.
It exists. I think it's still there.
I've been to the strip club.
You've been to the Bada Bing, the Bing. Did you disrespect the Bing?
I would never.
Good. Okay, good.
I would never, David.
He disrespected the Bing.
The thing you said, David, about having this sort of like emotional interaction, this visceral interaction with another vehicle, but the person being kind of anonymous, right? It's like so much of the road rage thing of like, if you pull up to someone to be equidistant to them and you want to fucking yell at them quickly or like flash on the bird, part of that I think is the idea of being able to humanize them and being like, I'm angry at you, a person. I need you to be a person. It is what is so evocative in this movie. And I feel like Spielberg has said the thing he locked into when he read the story after quickly leafing over some pictures of boobs was that it's like fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
And the thing, I think one of the smartest decisions this movie makes is like, there's a certain logic to the idea of maybe you don't show any part of the driver at all because what is the scariest thing having no glimpse of the person.
Right. It's just this machine.
But he will give you these shots that the Dennis Weaver character wouldn't be able to see from inside, the cab of the truck.
Right.
Of his foot, of his arm, of his hand on the wheel. It's always sort of fragmented, but it's like clear shots from almost the driver's POV. And I feel like you need to do that because the movie needs to underline like, this is not supernatural.
Right.
This is not like a monster. This is just some guy. And that's what makes it even scarier is his motivations are inscrutable. They are beyond inscrutable, unknowable. They are fundamentally unknowable. There is no rhyme or reason to this. Is he doing this for sport? Is he insane? Is there some backstory you don't know? It doesn't fucking matter. You're just placed in this guy's reality, which is why the fuck is this happening? And I don't even really have time to consider that because I'm just trying to survive.
But it's easy to figure out or to start spiraling over like, well, is it that I kind of passed him and honked my horn at him being a jerk? Is it that I'm this, whatever, city slicker in my red Plymouth and he's like a salt of the earth rust and he just has rust and flames. He's just moving some rust and flammable flames.
Yeah.
I do have a picture of the driver if you want to see him. They did provide one picture of him if you're interested in the picture I want to show you. The picture I showed Griffin is, if you want to say Griffin.
It's Russell Crowe in the film Unhinged.
Right, which is like the opposite of this movie.
Yeah.
Where it's like, what if that happened to you? But rather than it was this unknowable sort of question of like, what does this represent or who is doing this? It was like a large Russell Crowe going like, fuck you, I'm going to kill you with my car.
Right.
The whole movie.
Right, and he's ostensibly the hero.
Just like,
of the
you cut
picture.
off the wrong guy, motherfucker.
I do think that's one of our friend Richard Lawson's best jokes ever on the 10 years of this podcast. I believe it was in the Witches episode where we were doing the box office game when theaters had not really reopened of what was in the top 10 the week that the Witches went on HBO Max. And Unhinged was number one because Unhinged was basically
Yeah, Solstice Studios released it on like 40,000 screens. 'cause
Right.
There was nothing available.
I think it beat Tenet by 1 week to be the first.
Yes, it was the
new
first
wide
widely
release.
released film. Yeah.
And you said like Unhinged #1, $2 million, and Lawson said, which is a pretty good gross for a documentary.
No, he's not the hero. He's a villain.
Is he? I've never seen Unhinged.
I've seen it. He's the protagonist, but he's a psychopath.
Okay, it's a falling down type.
Yeah, it's like what if you were
What if they
somewhat
broke you?
aggressive?
Yeah.
No, he's already crazy.
Oh, okay.
Like with a guy behind the wheel of a car, and then it turns out the guy you did that to
Was Russell Crowe.
right roided
Got it.
up on rage, not on steroids.
But who's
'cause
that guy? Who's the guy he's chasing in the movie?
I wish I could remember without looking it up, but unfortunately I can't.
Whoever this generation Gigonde is. Here's the thing I want to.
like Karen Pistorius, that actress.
Oh,
from Slow
interesting.
West.
Okay.
I don't know.
I want to state an intent here. 2025. I'm gonna really up the number of Gigonde references I make.
Oh, get him up there.
I think it's a perfect time to start reclaiming Kim Gigonde.
Do you want to bring up the movie Bad Johnson?
Yeah, that's a movie in which I think Nick Thune plays his penis.
Yes.
It's a comedy in which Cam Gigonde's penis comes to life and is played by comedian Nick Thune. These are fun names to say. Cam Gigonde and Nick Thune in the penis comedy Bad Johnson.
Bad Johnson, known as Schlong Story in some markets.
Yeah.
You're telling me this film was in multiple markets? I don't know.
There was a Deadline story recently announcing a Cam Gigonde, Kellen Lutz movie, and I texted David and said, this is like the Pacino, De Niro Heat team up of dog shit.
And what did I say? I can't remember.
I think I said the dollar store version. You maybe said it was the penny store version. Anyway, 2025 is the year Gigonde comes back.
He's back. Duel. He'd be good in a Duel remake.
Yeah, sure.
Let's do it.
I wanted to ask, have you ever had a scary road rage incident?
Like, no. I would say no. I've never had a thing where I'm like, oh my God, this person is like, this is unsafe and this person is going to attack me.
Have you been?
I've had like aggressive drivers fuck with me or yell at me or,
Yeah.
I've had shit like that happen.
No, I have this one with a truck that has really, it still stands out to me as one of those things where I'm like, this was a close call for me.
Okay.
I wasn't the driver, but I was in the car. We were coming back from Hartford, Connecticut. We went to a Dave Matthews Band concert.
So you were just riding high on being cool guys.
We were probably, definitely it was one of the coolest moments for me in my life.
Well, you're already on edge because if you're driving back from a Dave Matthews Band concert, there's always the risk that you're going to get hit with his shit truck. That's a real road risk. If you take an underpass, you might get DMB poo dumped all over.
Is that become their legacy?
It's like,
No, he's a respectable artist, but that is one of
Well,
the funniest
let's not go
things
crazy.
that's ever happened.
anyway, go on.
And we were on 95. We were kind of like heading basically towards the GWB, but at some point split off,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
going towards New Jersey.
Right.
And I don't know, maybe he pissed off this tractor trailer. The tractor trailer went into our lane and we almost swerved into that, like, you know, those like yellow plastic barrels that like
Yes, the exit
protect
lane.
you
Yeah,
from
yeah.
crashing.
Filled with water.
Yes. We almost crashed into that. Truly, it was like the truck really almost led us to crash. And he was doing it on purpose.
Wow.
For sure. It was very scary.
This is a dual kind of situation.
Yeah. And we slammed on the brakes and it was very close to us getting into a terrible car accident because of this tractor trailer. And as it drove away, it honked.
Jeez.
And I've gone by that intersection many
Think about
times coming back from New England. And I think about how I really could have gotten hurt.
Watch it. Watch your, backs out there, Blinkies. The mad trucker reigns supreme.
Here's another thing. I pull it up on my iPad because it is a slightly tough movie to talk through because it is so much just like.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I love how Ben futzed for 40 minutes on his console.
Yeah, but it was worth it.
That power.
It paid off.
Year 10, blank check. Year of miracles. Soundboard is back. Kamji Gunday references out the butt. Early Spielberg. Jelly Trilogy on Patreon. It's all happening. 2025 Year of Miracles.
I love it.
David,
Yeah.
I've suffered a great loss recently.
Oh, no.
A profound loss.
What?
Half a tooth.
Oh, yeah, that's true. They sawed half your tooth off.
I had a coronectomy. They cut my tooth in half. And I'll tell you what an experience like that does to a person.
Go ahead.
It makes you really value the teeth you do have.
You want good teeth.
My full teeth.
Mm-hmm.
This was a trouble tooth, and so they took part of it out. But the teeth I got, the good ones in there, I want to take good care of them. And sometimes oral hygiene can be a real pain in the keister to stay on top of.
Yeah, so why don't you get yourself Quip 360? It's an oscillating toothbrush, Griffin, that's literally going to revolve around you.
That's what I like.
I've been using Quip for a long time, but the 360 is the the kind of like round brush.
Sure. Yeah. This
So
is the whole thing with Quip. It's an electric toothbrush that doesn't overcomplicate the most basic daily ritual. I feel like Quip just exists to make this as easy as
right,
possible.
very simple designs, ultra quiet, super clean, easy to maintain, and is scientifically, according to the American Dental Association, scientifically proven to remove up to 11 times more plaque between teeth compared to a manual toothbrush and provide up to 2 times more whitening on day 1. And if you don't like it, return it for free within 30 days.
It's fine. It's easy to travel with. It is convenient. It's easy to clean. And if you do love it, you can brush easy, knowing you get a free lifetime warranty for purchasing on GetQuip, that's QUIP.com, and the opportunity to subscribe to Refill Heads by mail every 3 months so you never have to go to the store. This is a part I like. That's the kind of thing I forget.
You don't have to go to the store. It just happens. They just send it to you.
It shows up and you go, oh, right,
I get
time
floss
to change.
too. I get a bunch of Quip stuff sent to me every, few months. It's really, really helpful. They've got 25,000 5-star reviews and, people love Quip.
And they got a perks program. I love perks programs.
You do love perks.
Quip perks is a little hard to say. I'm going to say that's just for me. Quip puts their money where their mouth is. When you subscribe to AutoShip, you'll be enrolled in Quip perks to earn credit back over time.
Just for listeners of Blank Check, get 20% off site-wide and a free travel case and countertop stand at getquip.com/check. That's getquip.com/check.
Free your mouth today and save 20% site-wide plus a free travel case and countertop stand at getquip, QUIP.com/check.
GetQuip, QUIP.com/check. Quip.
I love the use of talk radio at the beginning of this film.
Sure. He's driving.
They do drop it a little bit.
Yep.
Which I think is largely because Spielberg wants to be able to make the most out of silence, which he employs very well in this film. It's interesting, the John Williams documentary, he credits John Williams with teaching him the power of pulling back and living in silence. That he will often say to John Williams, like, I think this is a spot where we could use something, and Williams will be like, you might want no music under this. And Jaws was like an example of that, where he was expecting wall-to-wall score, and Williams at certain points was like, you want nothing here? But he's already got such a good understanding of it in this one. You have such long stretches without him using the score, and the score in this is totally solid.
Yeah,
I think
it's a good score.
Pretty strong.
Yeah.
But the talk radio at the beginning is interesting because it feels like a smart way to keep dialogue going while not feeling the need to, like, over-explain this guy. Which is, to this movie's credit, that it's, like, not trying to pathologize him too much. I know what you're saying of, like, the dialogue scenes added for the theatrical push it a little more, where, like, the less you know about this guy, the better. But I do think it's basically the right amount, save for the internal monologue shit.
I don't feel mad to learn a little bit. I just don't think you need it. But I also know that it's like, at that point, you're getting to be more like a 65 to 70 minute movie that's just car action.
Yes.
And there's only so many ways to ramp up the tension of one car, one truck, you know? And so, yeah, no, it's a good movie. It's a really well-constructed movie. It's like, it has the juice.
I'm just, like, sort of running through it here. So you have, like, the opening credits from the car POV, his drive.
Yep.
Him listening to daytime radio. Then he pulls into the gas station. The truck pulls out next. He only sees the boots.
He has the initial thing with the truck, like where
sure.
he passes it and it roars past him
Right.
and all that. And then then they're at the gas station, sees the boots, calls his wife.
Yes.
They talk that out. The guy at the gas station, who's just a great. Back in the day, man, you'd pull into a gas station.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, fill her up with Ethel.
Yeah.
Ethel Merman.
Yeah.
My first question. 2, can I? The guy is just like, can I lift the fucking hood? Because cars back in the day, I guess it's just like, I don't know, this thing could explode any second. Guy says you need a new radiator hose. He's like, forget it. But that's Chekhov's radiator hose, right? That'll come up later.
And you have like a
At
lot
the
of this...
diner, he fucking orders an aspirin.
Oh, sure.
He's just like, can I have an aspirin?
This
Like,
was
yeah,
your
I'll get you a
letterbox
fucking
log.
aspirin.
Yeah.
It's just back in the day, you could just be like, my head hurts because it's the 70s and I'm drinking like,
We used to be a proper
molten
country.
lead or whatever.
Aspirin was
I
on the
need an
menu.
aspirin.
Yeah. Might have been gratis.
Yeah, it probably was.
Asking for aspirin was like a cup of water. No, Spielberg, the phone conversation starts on him, and then in like the foreground of the shot, a woman.
the laundromat.
Yeah,
opens
you're like,
the,
this space is also a laundromat.
Right.
It does a good job in sort of that like taxi driver phone conversation way of just kind of like immediately sort of emasculating this guy,
Yeah,
or
seems
like
like a bit of a weenie.
decentralizing him. You're like, the movie isn't even that concerned with him. He's having a conversation to explain himself, and the movie's like, yeah, but more important shit's going on. He's in this woman's way. She's trying to get her laundry out. But I agree with Ben that I like that the conversation sets up like, okay, there's like a time crunch. His wife's already giving him the business about like, are you going to make it home in time? He's acting like so beleaguered by everything, right? Like, my boss is asking me to drive out to meet, but also my wife's haranguing me about the idea of not coming home in time before I've even made the drive out.
Right.
And also she's complaining about the fact that I didn't defend her enough at like a work party where it felt like she was being sexually harassed, and he can't really defend himself. Like, you're just like, this guy is just kind of nothing. It is the thing I love about 70s shit, where you watch this guy and you're like, I get that this movie is trying to code him as lame. If this guy walked into a bar today, you'd be like, that's the coolest looking guy I've ever seen in my life.
Now he looks cool. The glasses are cool. The
He
stash.
looks like one of the sabotage cops.
A little bit. The glasses especially.
Yeah. But you're like, this is a guy who's trying too hard to be hip. And then, then he's back on the road, and then this is when shit really gets scaled up. Here's a thing I find interesting about Spielberg, and I get into this a little bit on our Jaws episode, which will come out in a couple weeks. This is like an interesting time for film, right? This whole kind of like new Hollywood transition point.
Sure.
Of studios being like, maybe we don't know what the fuck we're doing anymore.
Right. Hey, yeah, Coppola, you want to make the Rain people?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. De
It's
Palma.
the kind of shit that results in Scheinberg being like, I don't know, give Spielberg a 5-year contract. We don't fucking know anymore. The old models aren't working, right? And you look at this point in time, and there's like a lot of the kind of like old master guys who are really struggling to keep up with the times, figure out how to stay relevant, right?
Right.
You have guys like Otto Preminger and like Billy Wilder who are just like hitting a wall in the 60s and are just like, I have not figured out how to keep up.
Right.
Someone like Lumet like transitions beautifully, right? Comes out of like 50s TV, understands how to become more relevant than ever in the 70s. But then this whole like era of, the movie brats coming up, and even like, Altman and Cassavetes, who were older and had already lived a lifetime to a certain extent, both of those guys are obsessed with like kind of ripping down tradition in a lot of ways. They're like, this is all creaky. It's too staid.
Mm-hmm.
You need to make this feel like relevant and present. Then you have someone like Bogdanovich who's like, we lost our way. We got to get back to the 40s. Like, Bogdanovich's whole thing is like, we need to get more classical in a certain way. And then Coppola's like still figuring out his shit at this point. Scorsese's figuring out his shit. They're both in this zone of like trying to make the movies they think they need to make to gain the cachet to make the things they want to make, versus Spielberg, who wanted to be an entertainer first and foremost and is viewing any piece as like an opportunity to show his like skills.
Right. George Lucas wants to do a Sebulba movie.
Of course.
He's working towards that.
Yes.
Coppola wants to do Megalopolis.
Yes.
He's working towards that.
Right.
Val
Scorsese.
Platinum.
Yes. But Spielberg is this guy who like is able to pull from like the most exciting new things that are happening while also having this like encyclopedic knowledge of the entire history of cinema. Like this is a movie of a guy using like incredibly classical tools. He's not fighting against tradition. He's also not like stuck in some pastiche.
Yeah, but he's right. He's definitely not tearing down, right?
No.
You know.
But he's like a fascinating bridge point at an era where most people were kind of picking a side.
Mm-hmm.
I do think there was this
like,
sense
it's like he's in
something's
the middle
changing
of
and which
tear it
line
all
are you
down
on?
and sort of stay the course. Yeah,
well,
sure.
it's what I think was like impactful about him being on set for Faces for a couple days and being like, oh, there's maybe like a different performance style here.
But not being like, this is how I want to make movies, independent of the system.
Right. But are there pieces of this I can take and put in, you know? And like a lot of his love of John Williams comes from him recognizing John Williams' work in early Altman movies. So you know he's paying attention to that stuff, you know? There's I
didn't know that.
I think there's
No, you
something
just watched the documentary, so
I did.
You know everything.
But I also knew that like Williams was an Altman guy before he was a Spielberg guy. I mean, he made like several Mark Rydell movies, which I think is where Spielberg said he really clocked him. And then said like, the second I have a budget to make a real movie, I'm hiring John Williams. But when he made Jaws, he used the Images score as his temp track.
Is it a good score?
The Images score is like a discordant, like, I mean, Images is like, you know, Altman's like Repulsion.
It's a good movie.
It's a great movie, but it's like
I don't remember the score.
a woman going crazy mostly inside her own brain and inside her own house. And it's like clanging noise and like constant sounds.
He did the Long Goodbye score?
Yeah. And I want to say, did he do Countdown? Did he do maybe like one of those other early ones before Altman really had his voice?
Not Countdown. Not
Liquids?
Cold Day in the Park.
I feel like there are 3 Williams Altman scores, but maybe I'm wrong about this.
I think there's only 2.
Okay, well, then I'm wrong about it.
Unless he did like California Split or something, but I don't think, no. Anyway, it just looks like it's those 2.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, Williams was very close with Altman, and Williams' first wife died filming California Split.
Huh.
Which is like a weird fact I didn't know until I watched the documentary.
What, died how?
Of like a completely inexplicable brain hemorrhage. She was 41 years old. She plays like a barmaid in California Split. Yeah, it's a wild story. Anyway, my point is, Spielberg is just this guy who's in this very interesting position at the right place and time to know how to synthesize all these different philosophies of what filmmaking could be. And he made them cohesive. And even in this movie, it's like, as you said, you can imagine the Gregory Peck version of this. That's the more obvious, overstated version of what kind of performance exists in a movie that is mostly on a guy's face. A thriller of a guy being chased, right? And you could see the more obvious old school philosophy is you need a Charlton Heston-esque performance to overcome the size of the story.
Right.
You need someone emoting out the ass.
Yeah, and incredibly not bad, but over the top.
Yeah.
Like, right, sort of screen dominating, like Gregory Peck.
There's an effectiveness to that, right? But like he's getting a more naturalistic performance out of Weaver. And the thing I love the most about this performance is when it starts, Weaver is kind of doing this gritted teeth, nervy tension, stress thing, right?
Yes, it feels like it's going to be a movie about like they broke this guy. And
right.
Like, yeah.
Which they do, but the way that is dramatized, I would argue, is the second half of the movie, his face largely goes slack. It's like at the halfway point, it's like this guy is so overtaxed now by this circumstance that he's not even emoting anxiety or tension outwardly. It's that thing where you're so exhausted that you just kind of go blank.
Yes, because also he's just like, I'm not going to convince anyone that this is happening to me. It's not going to stop.
He's in pure survival.
Right. And I just have to, eventually he's like, I just have to beat him.
And he looks more panicked.
With kind of the most ingenious trap of all.
And haunted because of that.
Right.
But most people would think, oh, hey, Dennis, we need to start at 2, and by the end of the movie, you're at your absolute biggest. And instead, he starts to numb down.
Yeah. Which is fine because the action is getting more intense, so you almost don't need him
it also
to
feels
be yelling and shaking
reflective
his head.
of reality.
Yes. That's an interesting point, Griffin.
Thank you. Every once in a while,
I
have
mostly
one.
think of this movie as just kind of like, brr, brr. Well,
Yeah.
actually, Ben, a lot of that.
Yeah.
And I guess the first time I saw it, which may have been the only time I've seen it, I don't think
Wow.
I'd watched Duel since I was a teenager.
Mhm.
I was even more like enraptured by cars, not in that I thought they were cool, but just there's like, I can't imagine being in this scenario. I'm not driving yet.
Oh, sure.
Like there's something like fearsome about like, yeah, what do you do if some truck harasses you?
Whereas I look at those shots where it's
On
like
the
the
open
camera is
road.
mounted behind the rear wheels on the side, and I'm like, this is the most terrifying machine ever created. Why do we let people drive these?
Now I'm just kind of like, yeah, I would just go to a diner and fucking chill out. I guess he tries to do that and it doesn't work, but he also picks a fight in the diner.
But this is right. This is like the failing of this guy. I mean,
Yes.
you understand why from how he is basically characterized in the first 30 minutes that when he gets to the diner and he sees the truck pull up outside, or rather the truck's already there, right?
Yes.
So he pulls
He's like,
up,
someone's here.
walks in, and is like, one of these guys is the guy. He can't get fucking over it. It gets him so in his head to have to reason with the idea of this being a person, even if that person is still abstract.
Right.
And then you just know he's never going to get over, like, so what do? I try to wait this guy out, but then maybe he's waiting for me. Or I get in my car and drive away and try to get a head start, but then he'll catch up to me. Like at this point, the idea of the guy and how inexplicable he is has grown so much in his mind that it's like, he's never going to get over this. Right? Like,
And this is the quote unquote, this is the supernatural element of it too.
he
Of
could
like
drive for 2 hours and be like, is the guy eventually
we
gonna...
all accept that he cannot like practically shake this guy.
Right.
Even if I'm like, yeah, check into a motel for the night. The truck needs to go where it's going to go. We're
Yeah.
all kind of like, no, the truck would just still be there.
The truck would still be there. And he's trying to do the math of like, okay, my only moves left is to make a direct plea to this guy, person to person.
Right.
How do I talk to him in a way that stops him from following me? But you live in his anxiety of being like, do I try to tough guy him? Do I try to like make an impassioned plea? Like, what do I do? And he can't fucking figure it out.
Right.
He can't ID which guy it is, and he can't figure out the right way to talk to anyone. And the way he does it ultimately only shows how rattled he already is. Where it's like, there's no way this guy's shaking this off. He could get home safely tonight and he'd still be terrified that the truck would drive through his bedroom window. Like at this point, he's fucked.
He stops at a gas station that has a bunch of snakes.
Mhm.
Tries to call the cops there.
Let's call it what it is. A gas station with a snake lady.
Yes, a snake lady. She's got a spider too, I think.
Uh-huh.
Truck destroys the phone booth while he's trying to call the cops and spread snakes everywhere.
Right. Best line of dialogue is the woman yelling, "My snakes."
Yeah.
My snakes, my snakes.
Maybe
She's kind of queen of the creepies. Is
Yeah.
that fair to say?
because she's got snakes.
Well,
And
and
a
a spider, as you
yeah.
said. I think that makes her queen of the creepies.
Love
maybe
that she's running that kind of roadside attraction.
Hey, you
type
bored?
of
Need gas?
place.
Want to see some snakes? I've got them. Any money you want to pay for this, honestly, was fine.
Yeah.
The most Wayne's World part of this movie, though,
Yes.
where it's like, no, it's not just that he runs through the phone booth while he's trying to call the cops. It's like also there's some
Now
snakes.
there's snakes.
Ah!
Yeah.
Oh, one thing I wanted to mention because we just skipped over it, but I think it should be called out because it's so funny, is
Mhm.
when he gets to the diner, he like kind of crashes into a fence
Yes.
Uh-huh.
and causes enough of a commotion that the people in the diner notice.
Mhm.
And at one point, the guy who works there asks him something like, "What happened?"
Mhm.
And he's like, "It was complicated," or something to that effect. And the guy goes, "It looked complicated." And he has that old timey movie patter, and it just like really plays for comedy. I love that moment. It's very funny.
Well, we also brush over one of the best parts of the movie. I mean, he's like living in the shame of like accosting this guy at the gas station and being like held apart, right? Held back from him.
Yeah.
And then he sees that the truck is pulling off. He tries to run after it and I'm like, what are you even doing?
Right. What will happen?
Right.
if you
Then
call
he
the
goes
car?
back to his car and he comes across the stop school bus, which
Oh,
is just
yeah.
an
Yes.
ingenious plot beat
Yes.
of like they're asking him to help push the school bus.
And what are you going to do? Not, help a stuck school bus?
And as far as he knows, the truck's gotten a
gone.
major head start. It's ahead of him. But he's so fucking panicked of like, should I stop moving? Can I help them? What's going on here? And then the truck comes back into view. And it's sort of this feeling of like, is the truck going to kill the school bus?
Right.
Is it going to go after the school bus? Is it that evil? Or is it just about him? And there's like great Spielberg editing of him getting increasingly anxious by the noise of the children. Just like completely meaningless, innocuous children like laughing and playing and yelling shit. That to him is just driving him insane.
That is added, right? That's part of the
whole school bus sequence?
Apparently the added stuff, according to what I'm
Opening
reading
credits, the phone call with the wife.
here, is the call with the wife, the school bus, and then some of the railroad crossing stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the school bus I think is incredible.
It is good. So maybe I should swing back to pro theatrical cut.
Yeah.
God, the train incident is so
Yeah,
scary.
that's right after the school bus.
Mhm.
Another thing that, again, you're just sort of scared of as like a new driver, where you're like, I can just like drive across the railroad?
There's
and, like,
just
that's allowed? And there's just, like a little wooden fence stopping me?
Yeah, it is crazy.
But my favorite thing is like he sees the truck pulling back, right? And he's like, fuck, I gotta go. I can't help the bus anymore.
Right.
And they're like, what? And he's like, I'm gonna die. He looks like a coward. He runs off. He's
Yeah.
cowering in fear. And then the truck comes up behind the bus and helps the bus.
Right.
Like he is
Kinda
so fucking
big
a
time
nerd
him.
that the bus big times him just to make him feel even worse about himself. And then sets on its way. And now it's like, now my sights are back set on you. And then it goes straight to the train sequence.
Yeah, the train sequence is right after.
Yeah.
Which is, the truck tries to push him in front of a train, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
And then that's when he tries to slow down and everyone's pissed off at him. And it's like,
Yes.
it doesn't matter. The truck just reappears over and over and over again. And then it's the snake lady. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And then it's the old people who he tries to talk to. Very Spielberg-y. Apparently he used that couple again in Close Encounters.
Okay.
Um,
But it's just right. It's a great way of showing like this guy can't interact with human beings anymore.
right.
Him asking for help seems suspicious now because he's been like wound
And
up
just-
so thoroughly up by this.
If anyone approached me
Yeah.
like a rest stop, I was like, hey, I know this is going to sound weird, but this one truck keeps appearing and harassing me.
Yeah.
I would just be like, you sound crazy. And what am I supposed to do about that?
Right. Except he's saying that with the energy of, you gotta call the police right now. The
And,
truck's trying to kill me.
If he called the cops and was like, hey, there's a brown truck,
Right.
they'd be like, okay, anything else?
I'll
Is
give
this-
you money. But then it's like they see the truck come and the truck is more antagonistic towards the old couple in a
Right.
way where they're also freaked out by it, but also like we got to look out for ourselves.
Yeah, we
You're
got
on
it
your
out of here.
own.
We don't want any
Yeah.
trouble. Right. And then he there's the part then his radiator hose breaks as predicted.
Yes.
He has to coast down the hill.
Mhm.
And almost gets crushed there.
Mhm.
And then you have the sort of final showdown
Yes.
where he lays his trap.
Sets the ultimate trap.
And we should just say too, because it's so ingenious the way this story unfolds, that moment in the journey is the uphill moment where if his car didn't have issues in that moment, he would be able to get away because the tractor trailer is not going to be able to travel up this steep incline as quickly as the car. So that really would be his moment normally to actually get away. But of course, it starts overheating and he's now pushing it to the limit of it. I mean, that's a moment where you're like, oh boy, this guy is ready to like just fucking scrap this car like to save his life.
There's an incredible Spielberg film language thing where you have this wide shot, what feels like a wide shot of just the car cruising on the road. And it's after a section where he's been free of the truck for a while. Obviously not free of the anxiety,
No,
but
but
you haven't seen the truck
no
for a
sign.
bit.
Yeah.
And then suddenly the car like skids in the middle of the road, seemingly in response to nothing. And the camera pulls back really quickly. You realize you were zoomed in and the camera is actually placed under the carriage of the truck.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
and you're like seeing him skid, and then the camera is revealing the thing that caused him to skid, and you're basically from the POV of like the wheels of the truck. And then the next shot is like this fast classical camera crane in from the sky into Dennis Weaver in the window, as it's just like, I need to figure this out right now. Like, it is the moment of like, I must set the ultimate trap of him deciding he needs to take things into his own hands.
Let's take out let's just assume the car's gone. Like, let's write off the fucking Plymouth.
But it's just like a perfect 2 shots of like a sort of perspective shift where you're like disoriented by, oh fuck, what I'm seeing isn't what I thought I was seeing. The image is revealing to me what everyone's been reacting to, or what he's been reacting to, followed by the shot that is wordlessly showing his gears running in his head and him like basically throttling into a whole new.
And then he sets the ultimate trap.
He sets the ultimate trap.
Essentially lets the trucker get the car and he goes down a canyon because Weaver's jumped out of the car.
Yeah.
As the truck's going down, he kind of makes this noise and
Exactly.
It's a little louder than that, and it's got this kind of roar to it. It's kind of cool.
Ben will amp it up in post. Yeah.
And
well, you know, there is of course the train horn.
God, the discipline. The fact that he's been holding back on this entire time, that's what makes Ben Hodsley a true artist. Much like Spielberg, he knows when you can just pull back. Let folks sit in the silence.
oh, that one was distant. Where's that train? It's on its way to Chattanooga.
No, he sacrifices his car.
Yes.
And there's this beautiful slow motion where the truck doesn't explode, even though the whole movie you've been clocking this flammable.
It does say flammable. I think it's a solid note.
Yep.
Instead, it kind of just like bleeds out. You see blood.
Yes.
So there's implication that the person died.
Yes.
But it also just feels like the truck is dying.
Yeah.
And then kind of a Jawsy ending.
Yes.
I mean, so much of Jaws feels like an expansion of Duel, right?
Mhm.
Just sort of like simplify the monster, simplify the intent.
Yeah.
You know, it's just ordinary people in this crazy situation. And I think that's why when he's making Jaws, he's like, should I be making another monster movie, essentially, which is what this is?
It's what's interesting about how his career went, where like Sugarland is so good and ends up feeling kind of anomalous in his career.
It does. Like, what is like the Sugarland Express? I guess we'll talk about that later.
I kind of would contend nothing. I think there are movies where he's trying to recapture certain aspects of it.
Yeah.
Like something like The Terminal is looking for some of the breeziness of it.
I wish it had found it.
Right, but is him also doing it in this heightened sort of like Capra pastiche kind of way?
That movie was heightened? The Terminal?
No, there's nothing quite like Sugarland. And Sugarland makes sense as this kind of dorky guy being like, shouldn't I make what all the other like 20-something filmmakers are making right now?
Well, I mean,
these kind of personal, generational youth movies.
but also car movies, right? Like Lucas with American Graffiti, and De Palma did a car movie, and you know, like, right? De Palma
used cars.
Yeah.
Like all these guys started out making these sort of like youth through the prism of cars.
Yeah, exactly. Independence.
It's kind of similar to Badlands in certain ways. Like it has all these things that make sense as like what a lot of his contemporaries' first movies were.
Right.
And then Jaws is like a gig.
I guess De Palma didn't make a car movie until like Wise Guys. Yeah, Jaws is a gig.
Which makes
And
sense
he's
that he
almost
gets
worried-
it based on the success of this. Like this is an incredible
based on
show
his-
reel to be like, I could direct Jaws. I could make the shark scary.
Right.
But then that changes the course of his entire career.
Jaws? Sorry.
No, like once he's made Jaws, how is he not going to make things at the absolute highest level after that? Like he can't make like, I'm just going to make another Hangout movie.
Right.
But Sugarland is kind of what was in fashion at that point in time.
Yes, this is somewhat shaggy, like
Right.
what's to be done with our youth, and like, yeah, the open road, and
It's just that his was
you know,
not wildly successful.
happy ending isn't going to happen.
So
yes.
no one was begging him to make another movie like that, and his career veered.
It veered. But Duel, just like him kind of just like sitting at the top of the hill.
Yeah.
And just kind of like taking a moment. It's kind of like in Jaws when they're just sort of paddling
Laughing
away.
and crying,
where you're
basically,
kinda like,
simultaneously.
Okay. All right.
It's also, look, we discussed this a lot 8 years ago, but it's why there were so many complaints about the second half of Spielberg's career, quote unquote, him not knowing how to end movies.
It's true.
And I think it's because the first half, he would end movies, he would get out so quickly.
He would.
He would reach the peak of the story and then just end. Like, he had a real skill set for just like, fucking, I don't need to wrap this up, you know? And yet it feels complete. I mean, yeah, is the last shot of Duel right? The credits basically roll over this shot of Dennis Weaver sitting in the middle of the hill, throwing rocks as the sun sets behind him, and you're like, I have no idea how he gets home. Beyond that, what is this guy's mental state for the next day, week, month, year, rest of his life?
Back in a car again,
right? Like, I love movies that end with, and what the fuck does this guy do now? Where you've just watched one incident in a person's life, one period, one series of events, and the movie just ends and lets you sit with, and do they ever fucking get over this? No. And that's totally what this is. He just sits there throwing rocks in like a beautiful sunset shot, and then the movie fades to black. Duel. Good shit.
The film was got a 20.9 Nielsen.
Okay.
So pretty good.
Yeah.
But was the 18th highest rated television movie of the year.
Which means it only got like 80 million viewers.
That's what I'm saying. Even though 1/3 of America's television viewers watched Duel when it aired, that was basically seen as like average.
It was in the bottom 4th or 5th of that slot.
I actually think I have the TV listings. You want to know the other stuff that was airing? Well, I don't have much here.
Okay, give me what you got.
So on ABC.
Oh, we're not doing ratings game. We're doing like what aired against it.
We can also do the ratings game for that year of television. But I'm just going to tell you
give me this right now.
This aired between an episode of The Mod Squad.
Okay.
Which was a very hot show about the youth in and of itself. And an episode of Marcus Welby, MD.
Of course.
Which
a very hot show about the youth.
Hot medical drama. And that's on ABC. CBS, it looks like the only thing I'm seeing here is Hawaii Five-0. I'm not sure what else. And NBC had something called The Search for the Nile, which was a documentary.
Okay, sure.
About, I guess, the people looking for the origins of the River Nile. Boring. Okay, so number one of the TV.
In 1971. You're giving me the yearly. Yeah.
Good. Is that right? Is that what this is here? So it's 1971 TV ratings. Okay. Let's find out. Let's find out. And it would be 70 to 71, right? Because this aired January. Yeah, okay. Yeah, number one is, a medical drama.
Trapper John?
No, Marcus Welby, MD.
Oh, fuck. Well,
with
I guess this is too early for Trapper John. What the? Of course it's too early for Trapper John.
It's way too early. MASH has barely come out.
MASH has barely come out. The show hasn't started. Trapper John's going to run off. The fuck am I thinking? If we ever do early Altman, we're going to have to do all of Trapper John MD on Patreon, right?
No.
I know we're loath to cover TV, but that just feels essential.
No. Marcus Welby I have never seen, but that is like your just classic boring ass TV
I was going to
show,
say.
where it's about a family doctor who makes house calls.
It's what I would use as shorthand to make fun of dumb TV from the 70s.
Where you're just like, this is all we've got. And they're like, yes.
And the people love it.
Number two, however, is something I've fucking never heard of.
Oh, wow.
It was a variety show.
Okay.
Shields hosted by a comedian, a black comedian. And it was one of the first TV shows hosted by a
it's not
black
Flip
person.
Wilson.
It is the Flip Wilson
You've never
show.
heard of the Flip Wilson show?
No.
Flip Wilson was huge. Flip Wilson, like
clearly
a massive pioneering figure. I was thrown off there because I knew Flip Wilson was one of the first, but I thought you would have heard of him.
I mean, I know him.
Yeah.
Like I'm looking at Flip Wilson. I know this face.
Sure. Yeah, no, Flip Wilson show is a big deal. It was a very funny comedic actor. Yeah.
Number 3 at the box office is
not the box office.
At the TV ratings is a sitcom starring a sitcom legend, but it's her third sitcom.
Is it Here's Lucy?
It's Here's Lucy.
Yeah, a Mike Carlson favorite.
After I Love Lucy and The Lucy Show, it was Lucille Ball's 70s sitcom, which ran for 6 seasons.
Yeah, that's the thing. It was like, Lucy's depressing final old age flop. and you were like, it ran 6 seasons. It was one of the 5 most popular shows on television. It's basically a show of, I think is it her real children? Play her children on the show as her adult children?
Yes, they do. Lucy Arnaz and Desi Arnaz Jr. Yes.
Yeah, and it's just her being like,
My kids won't leave me alone.
she sounds like that.
Yeah, sure. Number
I'm not
4.
exaggerating that much.
No. I mean, number 4 is
Ricky.
a long-running TV crime show
Okay.
that
It's not
had kind of a gimmick.
It's not Matlock.
No.
It's not Dragnet. Kind of a gimmick.
I mean, like the guy, there's something up with the guy.
Ironside?
Ironside.
Okay, there we go.
Raymond Burr.
What's up with them?
He's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
That was like, it's like, it would always be like, okay, what's your show? And it's like, it's about a cop. And he's in a wheelchair, and he's from New Mexico, or like there'd just be like some little
it
twist,
was the
right?
level of hook you needed. That's how
you
low
just
the
need
bar
something.
was. Yeah,
Kojak, he fucking has a lollipop.
yeah, truly.
Who loves you?
This
baby?
guy's bald. Yeah. What makes this cop different? He's got nice shoes.
Kojak. I've never seen an episode of Kojak.
Detective shoes.
Kojak does seem fun.
Kojak seems like a tremendous amount of fun. Vin Diesel has been threatening to make a Kojak movie for like 15 years.
He's bald.
Correct.
Number 5 at the box office.
If
at
that ever
TV
happens,
ratings.
I will watch all of Kojak,
course you will.
obviously, so that I can suddenly be a Kojak expert in time to explain what Vin got right. But every time Vin's like talking about what's coming up, he's like, I'm going to go back to Furia, 10 more Fast and Furious, and then I'm finally making Kojak.
Glad he's making Furia. Number 5 is the show that Dennis Weaver did 10 years on before, like, then
Gunsmoke.
doing Gunsmoke. Still in the top 5.
Wow.
You've also got the ABC movie of the week, of which this was one.
Sure.
You've got Hawaii Five-0, as I mentioned. You have something called Medical Center.
Perfect.
Which
What
was
if there was a medical center?
hospital show starring James Daly, who was, of course, Tyne and Tim Daly's father.
This is another installment of The Daily Show.
Correct. You have Bonanza, another Gunsmoke-esque long-running Western show. Gunsmoke, Rawhide, and Bonanza. I feel like it's just like when I was a kid, Rawhide would still be on TV sometimes because it has that great theme song.
Yeah.
And then I would watch 2 minutes of it and I would be like, it feels illegal that this is on TV in the 90s. Like, this is too boring for words.
Was Bonanza the one that Altman did? Altman did a handful of episodes of one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the great line that, like, you could tell which ones Altman directed because they didn't have a plot.
He did do Bonanzas.
Right.
But Bonanza's just another one. There's just like 500 episodes about.
I've seen like 1 or 2 of Altman's Bonanzas, and they are just like guys talking.
Sounds good.
They're just like sort of a long campfire
Back in the,
conversation.
just have anything happen. It didn't matter. People just
crazy.
wanted to watch TV. It was still like kind of new.
Right.
Number 10 is the FBI, which I mostly think of from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood at this point.
Right.
But that's one of those shows that's like, the FBI are great. This show is presented in partnership with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Oh, boy. Right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
But knowing, you know what? Knowing that ABC TV movie of the week was the highest rated one is actually good context to know for this. That
it was hot
Spielberg
stuff.
was getting a slot on the best TV movie rotation, and yet his rated low for the season, but immediately caught the eye of the people who mattered.
This was its second season, I think.
Okay.
Of whatever.
Yeah.
So coming up, third season. Sorry. Coming up on this show are other Steven Spielberg films.
Yeah. Several of the most successful, popular, and acclaimed movies
Some of them are well known.
in
It's
human
true.
history.
E.T., Jurassic Park,
Yes.
Close Encounters, Raiders of the Lost Ark. These are all movies he made.
He made them.
And we'll be forced to talk about them.
Forced. As David stifles a burp.
Yep, for your viewing entertainment. But next week is his certainly probably still least seen film, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, it's not hard to watch the Sugarland Express, but you know.
But as I've been telling people that we're doing this series, telling people in confidence because it hasn't been officially announced, and friends go, "What's coming up?" And I go, "We're finally doing early Spielberg." They go, "Oh man, Sugarland." I do feel like there's a growing Sugarland. I don't want to say reappraisal, but because it's different.
You watch it and you're like, this is interesting. He never quite did something like this again.
And it's so good.
And it's good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
spoiler alert, it's a
interesting
really
as a
good
sliding
movie.
door. I don't bemoan the filmography we got out of him, but it's
No.
interesting to watch and just go like, He could have just made 15 of these and just been a really good filmmaker who someone like Pauline Kael hailed and never really had a commercial breakthrough.
Yeah.
There is a big, element of luck even involved for someone who perhaps innately is the most gifted filmmaker of all time. Like, I think just in terms of raw understanding of the relationship between images and story, he is, watching these early ones, it's just kind of mind-boggling how fully formed he was out the gate.
And yet, I probably wouldn't put Duel in the top 20 Spielbergs.
No, that only speaks
I might put it right outside, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nah, it kind of fucks, though. Maybe it's number one.
Interesting.
No, I'm joking. Or am I?
Who knows?
Anything else, Griffin? We're done. We did it. Duel.
Blank Check, Season 10, Year of Miracles.
Wait, we're season 10 now?
No, Year 10.
Yeah, there you go.
It's like season, like fucking 50.
All right.
We should do that. We should figure that out as well, what number season this is.
Someone figured that out. Not us.
Through miniseries.
Yeah, let us know.
Yeah. But yeah, Year of Miracles, I'm calling it. Get ready for all bangers.
Mhm.
No complaints, all fun. Yeah, and excited to talk about these movies.
Yep.
Look, there was a certain amount of strategy when I was like, is it kind of a bold move to just start off Year 10 and finally settle the balance of Spielberg?
Yes.
And your immediate response was, those are the exact kind of movies I'm going to be in the mood to rewatch with two recently born babies.
Yes.
And I said, David, it was part of the thinking.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we're ending on a high note.
I don't know. I'm done. I'm done.
Okay, I'm done too.
I'm
Thank you
sitting
all
on the
for
top
listening.
of the cliff throwing pebbles at the corpse of this episode.
Thank you all for listening. The episode was a triumph.
Yeah, it was.
Tune in next week for Sugarland Express. And as always,